Okay, the next item is to approve the agenda. And before we do, there's one change. We're going to switch items E and D. So you'll come before D. Does anybody else have anything that they wish to move from the consent agenda to the agenda or add to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, this is our first opportunity for public comment. We value public comment. It helps us know what's going on in the community and know it has to concern Oakland Community Health Network, and you're limited to 5 minutes. Does anybody wish to make public comment at this time?
Okay. And this report, which was a yearly report, had 96 complaints from people with mental illness and 406 or 409, I think, from people with developmental disabilities. Shortly after I got this, I asked Mike Daly to provide me some information on the populations and how they compare with each other. There are more than 3 times MI clients than DDs. So the discrepancy in this report is there is 1 MI complaint for each DD complaint. 1 MI from each 12 DD complaints. And that means there's something terribly wrong. And I would like to know what this board is going to do to make some kind of accommodations so that people with mental illness have the opportunity to have their rights complaints heard fairly. I don't think you can come up with any explanation except maybe our DD population is being abused, that's the only one I can think of, that there should be 12 times as many DD complaints as MI complaints. You know, somebody said, well, we're doing what we're supposed to do. Well, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. The law says you're supposed to make accommodations so our people get heard and they get fairly treated. So I'm asking this board, what are you going to do to make accommodations for people with mental illness so that their rights complaints get treated fairly? So my comment, I hope I don't get the flaky response I got before, which was, well, we're doing everything we're supposed to. You're obviously not doing everything you're supposed to, or you wouldn't have that discrepancy. So, thank you.
Cummings, you'll get a written response, hopefully. I know, hopefully
Yes,
you'll.
we're doing everything we're supposed to.
Does anybody else wish to make public comment at this time? There'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Next item is the consent agenda, which is approval of the board minutes, acceptance of the COW minutes, acceptance of CAC minutes, and acceptance of the RRAC minutes. We have a motion to approve them?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the board minutes from May 21st, acceptance of the committee of the whole minutes from 5/13, acceptance of CAC minutes from 5/22, and acceptance of recipient rights advisory committee minutes from 5/2.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the board minutes and the three committees, and accept the three committees' minutes. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item B is the stories that inspires hope. I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves.
Evening. For our stories that inspire hope this month, June is Men's Health Awareness and is also PTSD Awareness Month. So with me, I have Chaka McDonald, who is our Veterans and Military Family Navigator here at OCHN. And then also joining us is Charles Scott. Charles is the owner of Heaven Sent Barbecue and Catering. He is an honorably discharged Desert Storm veteran. Mr. Scott is also a previously incarcerated veteran. He is a founding member of the Tri-County Veterans Network and was a UAW Region 1 Veterans Council member and UAW Local Veterans Committee Chairman. He has also worked for the Disabled American Veterans as a Veteran Service Officer. He also works with OCHN, and he's presenting with our crisis intervention team training previous year and then also next week. Mr. Scott has dealt with his own emotional trauma from his military service and incarceration and has been able to navigate various processes on multiple levels upon reentering society. Mr. Scott has also utilized behavioral counseling and faith-based counseling services through the VA and outside sources. I'm going to turn it over to them now.
Thank you for having us tonight. We're definitely appreciative of being able to address you this evening. So once again, my name is Chaka McDonald. I'm the Veterans and Military Families Navigator with Oakland Community Health Network, and also the proud son of a Marine, two uncles that also served United States Army in Vietnam. Part of my role, well, majority of my role is to help our men and women in Oakland County and in the region to connect to various resources, be it behavioral health or various resources in the community. I've been definitely, it's been an awesome road, very rewarding to work with so many men and women of various standings, in the community and their families, to be able to work with them and to be able to assist our men and women in Oakland County. With Oakland County having, Oakland County as a county has about 58,000 veterans in the county. Roughly 212,000 veterans live in this Tri-County area out of.
I'm just trying not to get feedback, sorry. Push
Out
that one
of-
down.
Out of the,
Push that one down.
push this one down.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. But about 35% of Michigan's veterans live within this Tri-County area here, between Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County. Mr. Charles Scott and I had the opportunity to meet many years ago at a previous employer where I worked in prison reentry, where the exposure to the veteran world to a degree was really introduced through prison reentry. There are many men and women that were paroling out or coming out of the Department of Corrections. And that surprised me. Many of these men and women that having honorable discharges were going to jail or getting in trouble and going to prison, things like that. And so from that, I formed a committee and to help these men and women, help that disconnect, because they came home and there was a disconnect. And so Charles and I had the opportunity to meet, like I said, many years ago. He's an awesome example of, once again, what the United States military can do for our men and women, the discipline and the drive, and just with the right supports can make a turn. So I'm not going to take Charles's time of talking. I want you guys to definitely hear from him and the awesome work that he's done.
Let's just all start from the top. I met Chaka about 10 years ago. Met him with the Michigan Department of Corrections. He was working for JVS, like he said. I was preparing to come home after being incarcerated for almost 10 years for a violent crime. Had family support, spousal support, direct, even some mental health benefits. Didn't know exactly where to go. It was great that at that time, we were able to connect on my way out instead of after an incident or, something negative afterwards. Veterans Court is a big thing right now, which I'm grateful to say that we've been a part of from day one. They didn't have that when I got out of prison. It wasn't a resource that was available to any veterans at that time. I raised my kids in Wall Lake. My daughter Jessie graduated from Northwood University. My nephew Jamel graduated from a little small Christian school. I can't think of the name of it right that. And my son Cameron was athletic star in the Wall Lake School District. A lot of my resources living in Oakland County were resources that were outside of the VA. I had opposite insurance other than just veterans insurance. So I was able to utilize as employment with JVS and a number of other things that were available to me because I opened myself up to what was being presented. I actually learned that in prison. Understanding that there are rules and there's a system, and you can stand on that system and use it as a platform to elevate not just yourself, but other people that are around you. You can be a positive influence using it, or you can be a negative influence using it. I've been able to be a positive influence because I've kept positive people around me. I had to learn that as well. Toxic relationships can happen at any given moment. The majority of the time, people are going through all kind of stresses in their own life. So to have someone and a family that was willing to shoulder the stresses of my life with my wife and my family has been awesome, and it's been great for me. And all the way down to my grandkids. That's my granddaughter back there calling me. Oakland County is a place of great resource. You just got to know where to go. You got to know what you're looking for, and you got to know who to look for. I've been doing this with Chaka for, like I said, 10 years. So we were on the ground floor when they did the groundbreaking with Pequot Square and General Robert Smith and just all the changes that have happened in the state of Michigan, period, over the last 10 years. So to expand the resources in Oakland County for veterans who need mental health issues, need mental health support, or even physical support for guys who have had limbs, missing or whatever illnesses that they're dealing with, to have it here where they can use private resources like I did. I had a counselor at the VA, but because of the amount of veterans that are utilizing the VA, when I really needed to talk to someone, I had to wait for that appointment. My job as a veterans liaison is to keep people out of the emergency room and out of the graveyard. Fortunately, that's usually where we end up. Either we're bad people, struggle with the changes that have happened in our lives. I'm quite sure everybody in here either has a veteran in their family or knows a veteran who's struggling in someone else's family. When I was a kid growing up, my stepfather was a Vietnam vet. Both my grandfathers were World War II vets. All my uncles. So the term shell shock, I didn't hear it, but I saw it. And as a kid, you were taught, that's just Uncle so-and-so. That's how he been in the war. He okay, but that's just how he is. So then I go and I come back, and I don't want anybody to say I'm crazy and that's just how I am. And this was one of the things I thought about when I was incarcerated. How do I change my life so I can make a life for that young lady that's back there crying right now? And I told my wife, I said, babe, when I come home, I don't want to come home crawling. I don't want to come home walking. I got to come home at least at an airborne shuffle or at a trot so I can navigate what's going on, jump in, and get started. I'm too old to come home and start at an infant's level or a child's level. I'm an adult and I have responsibilities. All the other veterans that I've known over the years who have been through similar situations like myself, they're back in prison. Or something else has happened. Some of them even dead, we know that. Some of them have committed suicide. I don't want to leave Oakland County to go to Wayne County or Macomb County to get resources. I want to be able to be as close to home as possible. If there's a veteran who is struggling and he calls me or he calls Chaka, we've gotten up out of our beds. We've stayed in a hotel room, bought food for people, straight out of our pockets when we really didn't have it in some instances, but to help a guy and his family or to keep a female veteran. One of the hardest things I had to deal with as a veteran service officer was having a conversation with a female veteran who had been sexually assaulted during her service. It's hard to talk to your daughter, and I have 5. My oldest is 40, my youngest is 23, just about, excuse my language, but a menstrual cycle. That's my child. So how do I have this conversation with this young lady sitting across from me who doesn't know me? But because I'm a veteran and because I've been through what I've been through, I have empathy toward other veterans who are going through what I've been through already in some instances. I would rather leave Walled Lake and drive to West Bloomfield or drive to even Southfield to settle an issue that I'm having or have the ability to get something taken care of in that short drive than drive all the way to Wayne County only to be told I can't do it because I'm not a Wayne County resident. Hard when you don't understand the cycle of life as far as understanding the position that people are in, understanding the position that you're in, coming home with this huge responsibility, being a father, being a granddad, being that son that you weren't before your incident happened. The weight and the pressure of just the changes in life on a daily basis. Just today, for instance, we came here from my wife's doctor's appointment. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And praise God, she's on the other side of it. She's cancer-free. Most of you probably know someone who's had breast cancer or some form of cancer. And you can imagine the stress that it puts on your life. So imagine the stress that it would put on the life of a veteran who has PTSD, who's been incarcerated for almost 10 years, whose PTSD is maxed out to 10th level probably, and just life in itself, and I have grandchildren and children that I'm responsible for as well. Had I not had cognitive thinking skills, had I not had clinical therapy, had I not had the emotional and mental health support that I did 10 years ago and to this day, I couldn't have handled this. Handled this at all. I had to walk away from my job that I had been waiting on for 10 years. Walk away to take care of my wife. We lost our home, one vehicle. We were even homeless because the support system for veteran families, I had to go to a whole nother county to get it. It was hard. You know, like I said, I raised my kids out here. I raised my kids in Wall Lake. They knew me for my business and everything. We knew the Development Authority. We knew everybody out there. So we had to leave our lives to deal with this situation. And it was hard because there was no veteran support in my own county. I had to leave. So speaking for other veterans who are struggling right now, on top of, you know, sexual assault, traumatic brain injury, loss of a limb. I got a veteran that lives next door to me right now. She is a Marine. She is a Marine through and through. Even in the military anymore, she still walks, talks, and acts as if she's still in the service. I was taking out the trash, and I'm not gonna be much longer. I was taking out the trash and I had my granddaughter with me. And she came out. She spoke to my granddaughter, and I spoke to her, and I said, "How you doing today?" And you could just see it in her face, how she's struggling. Anybody understand what I'm talking about? Just the struggle, you could see it in her face. I didn't want to hug her or place my hands on her, so I just took a moment of my day and let her know that no matter what's going on, you can make it through this. You can get through this. And I used some of the stuff that I learned in faith-based counseling. 4 days later, my front door was open. She knocked on the door. She thanked me. She said, "That thing that you do every morning when you get up?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've been doing it for the last few days, and it works." So, you know, anytime you need me, you know my door is open. We're available, anytime you want to talk. Then the veteran that lives next door to me on the opposite side, he came over. He's an older veteran. He's a Korean War veteran. What I'm saying is, it's not just us who were Desert Storm. It's not just Afghanistan. It's from World War II guys all the way down. Self-medicating doesn't help anything. But if I got somebody I can talk to, if I can call Miss Michaela at 3 o'clock in the morning and she's willing to talk to me, if I can call Miss Downey at 4 o'clock in the morning and she's willing to talk to me, if I can call you at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 2 a.m. and tell you, "Hey, I feel like running out of my house right now," and I can turn to Chaka and say, "Hey, man, such and such just called me. He's struggling right now. I got all the grandkids. Can you handle this one?" Because that's what we've done. That's the stuff that we've actually done. We've been boots on the ground for 10 years in this, and I've lived through it, and he's lived through it with me and his dad. So thank you for hearing my story. I'm grateful for this opportunity. This isn't my first time doing this. It's from my heart. It's really from my heart because I live it every day. And to just get that point across, that if you have a nephew or a neighbor or a cousin or a friend, you can give them my phone number. You can give them Chaka's phone number. We'll do whatever we can. We'll connect them with whoever we need to connect them with to get them help. But if they live here in Oakland County, it'd be better if they could do it at home.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for Jonathan?
Thank you for sharing your story and the situation. One thing that sort of struck me is you talked about the challenges in not just navigating the systems, but finding what services and supports might be available. Is it because of the way things are described or labeled, and they vary from the military side, or why is that?
It's kind of both. If I'm a veteran and I'm struggling, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name? Kuchar, okay. You're my neighbor. I would, thank you. And you and I, we have a pretty decent rapport on the surface. And I'm struggling, but I don't want you to know I'm struggling. But if you have a veteran in your family or someone that you know of, you can kind of see it. I really don't want to tell you that's what it is because I don't want you to think I'm crazy because I'm not crazy. But that's the label that we get. We prefer to be with someone who has a military background or the VA. He's a big 6'6", 300-pound, 325-pound guy. But we got along because of our connection in our faith base. Things that I wanted to talk to someone about that weren't necessarily about my military background, he was able to hear me. Because I had good insurance working at Chrysler, I was able to utilize him as well because at the VA, what's the right word to use when you go down? Horrible. Just to,
If I can quip to that one real quick, with the VA can be complicated for a lot of veterans. I'm being nice.
That's a good word.
It can be very complicated. It can be very overwhelming.
Yes.
And with Oakland County's veteran population, majority being 50 and above, many of these veterans have not utilized veteran service. So it's like, what do I do? And so I see even some of my role and Charles' role is being that navigator,
Yeah.
having, establishing those connections at the VA, which we've done, to have a warm handoff, because it can be very, very overwhelming. If I've connected, I just spoke to a Vietnam veteran at CNS's Men's Health Day, and which was awesome. We had quite a few veterans come by the table. And this gentleman had never registered with VA. He was a he was a Vietnam era veteran, did 2 tours in Vietnam, and just did not trust VA. So I'm at the point now convincing him to go down. The reason why he had to get out, he was going to go for a 3rd tour in Nam. He got wounded by a sniper's bullet. He was a gunner, the helicopter. And his whole mindset is, I don't trust VA, but he needs help.
Yeah.
So I got to coax him to take him down there, which we've done, and physically take him down and get him registered.
Working at Chrysler, I knew Vietnam era veterans who been at Chrysler 30 years. Get up, go to work every day, pay their bills, take care of their families. They struggle within themselves, quick to snap. But because of the insurance, they're able to seek outside help other than the VA. A lot of guys are getting Social Security and SSI, so they get Medicaid and Medicare. I don't know the parameters of that as far as guys in Oakland County Health Network, as far as them seeking. But it would be great to be able to point people in that direction. It really would, because I worked in Port Huron, Marysville, and I lived in Wall Lake. At distance. Every day, driving to work every day. So I don't have a lot of time. Most people don't have a lot of time to drive long distances to get help. They'll just shut it down and go in the opposite direction.
It helps.
My observation from family members, think a large part is the fear of being seen as weak after being the strongest members of our society. And I'd like to think that that's going to have to start at the grassroots with the services themselves that educate and say, it's okay. You're still strong, even though you're vulnerable and human. I'm sorry, I'm going to get emotional because it's a really tough situation in my family right now. My other question was, do you have anything physical that we could hand out so that we could say, here's someone who can help, aside from our normal materials that we have? Is there something, Shaka, that you have that you could team us with? So if we see someone struggling, we know why they're struggling. We know that they're not going to open up to us, but we want to send them to you experts. Do you have something we can share with them?
Yes, ma'am. My brochure flyer that I normally disseminate in the community, I can go make copies even tonight and have them for you. But yes, that's one of my primary. And then one of my other, I've tried to work with various organizations from Oakland County Vet Services, once again to the VA, to Easter Seals, to our providers. So definitely out there, as you stated, making a lot of providers aware. And once again, a lot of it's breaking down that stigma. That stigma, if I'm, when I've talked to so many veterans and the different things that Hollywood puts on a TV screen, they make it like men and women are robots. And so I think a lot of folks just think that these folks can engage in these very violent situations, or if I've never was in combat, I've still been trained to do such and such, and I had a purpose and I had a mission, and to no longer have that mission or that purpose. So a lot of it now I see is a lot of education and re-education of their different organizations and providers to, number one, remove the stigma of anxiety or PTSD or depression, remove those stigmas and move more toward that treatment, like it's okay. You're not a robot. It's, you know, I understand if that affected you, that trauma, so yeah, I definitely will provide you my brochure.
If you could, yeah, because I
Yes, ma'am.
find that when you hand someone something and they have something to look at and think about, they're more likely to act on it than if it's a mention and they don't have it in front of them. When you're in crisis, you need to see it, so you know
Yes,
what
ma'am.
number to call. It can't just be a concept.
Yes,
So if you
ma'am.
could give us that, I'd really appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. You're welcome.
In addition to that, I have an uncle who's a Vietnam vet. His name is Leroy Johnson. He's had PTSD issues for a long time. He's battling with the VA to get his Agent Orange compensation. And I saw him, I think it was last summer, on a family reunion trip. And we were just talking, you know, he was telling me everything. So I went to the computer in the hotel and I printed off the DBQs. Remember I told you that? I printed off the DBQs for everything that he was dealing with that the VA were slow to process because he worked for BP for 35 years. So he has great insurance. I said, look, fill this information out. You've got your military medical records? He said, yeah. I said, take the medical records to your doctor and have him read it first and have him also put on there that he's read your military file. It's got to be stated on there. And then have him fill out the disability questionnaire for everything that I've given you, whether it's your primary care doctor or whether you go to different specialists to get this done and get it done. He got it done. He took care of it. I saw him, what is this? I saw him in May down in Florida. And he hugged me and he had tears in his eyes. He said, man, I've been fighting this for 30 years. I seen you, did what you told me to do, and everything just started happening the way that you said it would happen. Even though Chaka isn't a military veteran, Chaka's an ex-police officer. His dad, there are military personnel and then there are extreme military personnel. And to me, that's jarheads.
I'll definitely say the
Marines are out there. And I've lived with some, trained with some, but even when they get out, they're still Marines. It's engrafted in their DNA that they're Marines. So when I come across these guys and people don't understand the intensity that's on them or their demeanor, their physical demeanor, I do. I get it. I understand it. So to be able to call Chuck and say, hey, man, this guy, he lives over in Farmington Hills. I need to get him to you, or can you get to him? Where can we send him other than Pontiac? Let's call Dr. Such and Such over there where you work at. Can we send him over there? You think they'll take him? And then you get that, walking in the VA is enough. It's a big, beautiful hospital, but when you have issues with dealing with trust in the military after a lot of stuff you've been through, it's hard to just walk into the VA. But if I could come to your office, it's and quiet, you got the waterfall sitting in the corner, it's nice and quiet, you got the air conditioning on, it's not burning up, and we can sit down and talk. That's so much better than me having to go down to the VA and listen to a bunch of guys cackle about a lot of problems, having struggles and different things when I got enough stuff on my mind. How it was for me, having private counseling to help me through what I had to go through. So I just wanted to share that. That's all.
No other comments? Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a presentation from our Public Affairs Representatives Ben Botkin and Noah Smith.
Hesitate to follow that presentation. So whoever did the schedule, thank you so much.
To go from stories that inspire to talking about the legislature.
And that's distinctly uninspiring. Was on the public record, wasn't it? So you have in front of you a legislative update that we put together for you. This will contain most everything that we've been working on and some things we haven't. As far as information goes for you for this evening and can be considered to be up to date pretty much as of today. So just as a lay of the land goes, obviously we have a new administration, we have a new legislature right now started January. And so whenever that happens, the governor gets another month, an extra month to put a budget together than normal. And everything kind of takes a little bit to get running, okay? So it just has to do with both the legislature and the governor hiring people, they're getting their feet wet, they're finding the bathrooms, that kind of thing. And so it just takes a minute longer than normal. And so the pace has been a little slower than normal thus far, but I expect it to pick up. Not to say they haven't done some pretty heavy things so far this spring, but compared to the blistering pace we had last session, it started out just a little slower this year. But it will pick up, and we will be probably not be grateful when it does, but it will. That said, the budget cycle generally occurs from February through this time of year, mid-June. It's almost always complete by the 4th of July, so that folks can go home and do their parades. This year, however, due to the slower start, and due to a small thing called road funding, it has been hung up a little bit. And so right now we have the budgets coming out of the House actually tomorrow. The budgets at this point don't mean a lot, okay? Just so that you're aware. They go through both sides, and then basically they get sent to a conference committee between the houses, and they decide what's going to happen based on some targets that they're given by their leadership. So the speaker, the majority leader, minority leader in both sides, and the governor's office will all work together to kind of determine how much money is out there and which budget gets how much, right? And then the committee chairs will go back with their minority members and figure out what gets put in those budgets, usually this time of year. We have this year, though, is that we have road funding that needs to be figured out. There is a public mandate and outcry over the roads. We have a governor who ran on fixing the roads. And so road funding is going to get solved. There's going to be money for roads. That affects the rest of the budget. The governor's suggestion on road funding was a 45-cent increase in the gas tax in order to basically get about $2.5 billion, $2 billion of which would go into roads. The legislature balked at that idea a little bit, didn't want to do that, and so has said that while I think, they haven't said they won't do any sort of increase, I think that's safe to say. They have said that they're not doing 45 cents on the gas tax. The Senate has been a little bit reticent on a plan for roads, but has been a little more about doing something long-term. So in other words, I think the majority leader in the Senate would prefer to find a long-term solution that occurs over several years. So we're fixing X% of the road each year, and every 10 years or 12 years or whatever it is, all of the roads are in good shape. The House plan has been to take the sales tax on gasoline and put that into roads instead of basically schools. And so that would come up with about $500 million in the first year at 4 cents, and then when the full 6 cents goes into effect, about $860 million. I think the number is, it's south of 900, north of 800. So it's in there. Some 850 is, I think, a pretty good guess. Is what that would generate in year 2 and going forward. That has met with some opposition from the education community, as you might imagine. And so around we go, right? So the discussions continue. Obviously, this group, certainly cares about roads, I'm sure. However, not your main concern here, but I'm telling you this because it affects the rest of the budget. We're talking about $2 billion. And so if it's not found in some other means, they may be finding part of it in the general budget, right? That means cuts to all the things that we care about, perhaps, okay? So those are the discussions that are happening. Most likely, there's going to be a little bit of everything. There's probably going to be some new money. There's probably going to be some existing general fund money. There's probably going to be some cuts, okay? So this is the lay of the land, and until the governor and the leaders in both sides of the legislature figure out what they want to do with roads, there's not going to be a budget. How long this will take is your guess and mine. I think if things are going well with the road discussions, that we could have a budget by the end of July, first part of August maybe. If things are going bad, then I think we could run into September, right up to the deadline for the budget to begin October 1, which is when it's required to happen. So right now, although we're passing, the legislature is passing budgets, they don't mean a whole lot right now, okay, until we have more of a plan. So the boilerplate's a little more important at this point than the money pieces in the budget. And so the boilerplate's really what we've been concentrating on as we've gone forward. With that, I can give you a little 298 update. Section 298 is the integration boilerplate that you all are familiar with from the last, I don't know, 5 years now, right? I think it's 5 years now. And the integration pilots were supposed to start occurring October 1 of this year. I think the discussions on the financial side, the fiscal side of the house weren't going well, haven't been going well, that kind of thing. And so the boilerplate that came out of the Senate a month ago, basically said at the end of the pilot project, we're gonna go statewide, right? It was kind of full speed ahead. The House side kept basically the language that was in it in the current year, which is to kind of continue the process. Governor kept the same language, so it was kind of 2-to-1 on that. The rumor is that the boilerplate may reflect more of what we have been working toward, which would be integration of care, coordination of care, the mental health and the physical health side talking to each other, right? And making the care work. And so it sounds like maybe that's where it will head. It especially sounds that way after Friday. So Friday, the department released a letter and a press release stating that the integration pilots would be basically put on pause for a year while they kind of worked these things out. In addition, and I think this is telling, the integration pieces aren't going into the waiver request at this time. So that's interesting, I think. And, you know, I think from our perspective, probably good. So that's where 298 sits. Where it stops, nobody knows. We'll find out and we'll stay on top of it. The language that we had requested in the budget is going fairly well, I think. OCHN went to the legislature and requested boilerplate that I assume you've all looked at and seen at some point. If not, we can certainly get it to you, absolutely. And basically, it says, you know, we have this product through the department, Care Connect 360, and it's working, and it's coordinating care for these most at-risk folks. And so let's expand this and see if this can really be a solution to care coordination on a larger scale, right? And so OCHN put in, you know, some reporting requirements, very similar, at least in verbiage, to what's in 298, aside from mixing the fiscal house. This is literally coordinating the care at the level that the patient is seeing it, right? So, which is really what matters, right? I mean, if I need care, I don't care which side is paying for it, I need the care, and I need it to be seamless and efficient and good, right? So this is the idea, and so the Senate side put it in with one change, and the change was that the department may run the pilot. We had it, the department shall run the pilot. Obviously, there's a small difference between shall and may. For those of you who are attorneys, you know this. Those of us who play attorneys at work also know it. Shall and may, it's a big deal. Still good progress though, and it's still early in the process. The House side put in literally everything we asked for and more. They named Oakland as the pilot location, which is fantastic. And so, you know, we're working to get that completed as well. And hopefully, you know, once again, this entity can provide solutions where solutions need to be found. And hopefully it won't take us 5 years to do that. So, so that's good. As I said, the budget is kind of in flux at this point, but we've got some other pieces in here. I did make note, there's a Detroit Wayne pilot as well that's pretty similar, but different. It involves an RFP, I think, and some shared savings, that kind of thing. And so I think that what's going to happen is, and we'll know more this week, but in discussions with the department, it sounds like the department is going to take a similar stance on all of the integration requests that they're starting to get now, as this other thing kind of moves along. And that stance is going to be, don't dictate this to us, let us run these internally without boilerplate. We will still advocate for the boilerplate, obviously, because then we know exactly what we're getting, and we know who our partners are, and we can use that data. So, so that is that. We've got, you know, there are a couple other things in here. The Medicaid local match requirement is in both sides. It's set at $100 in one side and $200 in the other, just as a placeholder for the dollars of it. The Senate side basically kept it as is, so they do require the local match for Medicaid. But the House side did something interesting, and they put in a new section, subsection 3 in that boilerplate section. And it indicates that legislative intent that we move away from the local match being required to draw down Medicaid and instead put in state general fund for those dollars, which would free up a couple $1 million for you of local funding, which is, of course, the best kind of funding. It's more stable, and also you can use it for what you need it for. And so I don't expect that to be a thing this year, but I do expect it to be a discussion going forward. And it's great to see that intent language in there. Intent language doesn't require anything. It's simply intent. Okay, so I don't want you to read that wrong, that it's happening and we're going to save this money. It's intent right now. Okay, so a lot of this stuff depends on just what the money's going to be after the road discussion. So that's, you know, that's the story for basically the rest of the boilerplate, right? If there's money, we may see some. If not, we may not. So that's where we're at. One other thing, there was an announcement this week as well about a couple of grants going, one I think to Beaumont for opioid MAT funding, and one I think up in Marquette perhaps. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was the UP. Both hospitals, it was announced by the governor's administration this week. And I did talk this week with a person in the department and expressed to that person that Oakland is one of literally the only place I know where opioid deaths are on decline. And if they want more information about how and why that's working, that we would be more than pleased to provide that information or any help that we can offer. So I made that offer on your behalf. I'm sorry, but I was very happy to do it, and we could take any questions if you'd like us to.
Jonathan?
Thank you for the update. I've got two questions that aren't really covered on anything you covered. One is, I wondered if you guys had any sense I always talk about the 800-pound gorilla on the MCO or ICO side being Meridian Health Plan, which is now WellCare, which is now Centene. With all the changes with them being now part of a national organization, do they have less of an influence on the department or on the legislature than they used to?
You know, I can't speak to that. I think that what I can say is that this organization has had, I think, an influence on both. over the last 4 years, at least. And I think prior to that, too. I really do. I think that you're well-respected there, both in the legislature and in the department, for the expertise that you provide and bring to the table. There's almost nothing that, certainly nothing that the department does that they don't have some representation by this organization on. I think that the health plans in general have difficulty making the sale on this. There's probably various reasons for that. I don't think we can get into them. And a lot of it would be conjecture on my part. So I don't know that I can give you a factual answer there.
You never know how the invisible hands work. It's more like a sense of things. So I really thought I had two. I really have three questions. The other is, because there's only so much money that MDHHS is going to get from Medicaid, we have, as the mental health side, a small portion. The plans have a larger portion. Any sense of a way that, or any steps we can take to influence, and I don't know if that's legislative or if that's the department, to give us a larger percentage of that money through carve-ins and carve-outs, or just in general, that they might not be able to
Yeah,
get
that,
MCO increases this
yeah,
year.
I mean, I think that crosses several issues. That crosses rebasing, that crosses maybe your local match even, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that kind of cuts across, and I think yes, we're trying from a larger perspective, the 50,000-foot view. I think we're trying to work on all of those things. I think year to year, the things that we see as possibly being successful change, right? And so we kind of have to, I hate to use a sports term or a military term, but I think we have to know where to engage, right? And how. And we try to be somewhat surgical when we do that, based on what the landscape looks like. And so, this year, we really have been pushing on 298 and our own boilerplate. Not to say we're not doing other things, but that's been the main thrust. And then, the other things that we've got listed, we've been working on as well. So, yeah, I think we can have that discussion, I guess, is the shorter answer.
Last question I have, and I'll be done with it, is a while back there was this thing called Healthy Michigan, and the state loved the idea of the feds paying the lion's share, 90 cents on the dollar, I think it was. And I know there was talk about that coming down to 80 cents and 70 cents, and finally back down to the normal of never be normal 50-50 match. But there was talk on the Senate side about poison pilling it or getting rid of it. Is there any talk about them this year getting rid of Healthy Michigan?
There was some discussion early in the term about Healthy Michigan, and it's kind of gone away. And so, I'm going to let that dog lay, I think. But not to say it's not going to come back. But there was discussion about Healthy Michigan and authorization and what it would look like, and, that kind of thing. Mostly around work requirements, frankly.
I was going to say that work requirements seem to oxygen out of that discussion. Everybody kind of honed in on the perils of Medicaid work requirements, and that kind of took that spotlight, I think, off of, well, let's just get rid of it wholesale, especially because they could see that at least some even modest work requirements were a way to mitigate some of the public cost of that, and that was enough to satiate the majority. The discussions around work requirements and making them less onerous.
I was just curious, is there any effort to educate legislators that there are other substances other than opioids that need attention, that people are going without treatment because it's not an opioid? Is anybody having those conversations, either local or national?
I mean, right now, because of the crisis around opiates, right? The amount of attention that's been paid to opiates and, you know, their availability sort of across the spectrum. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of attention and money, quite frankly, from the federal level on down poured into that, especially because I think that's really where it's coming from, is that you've got national campaigns centered around it, around a crisis that folks have been talking about with availability and federal money that flows to states to focus on that. That's, you know, a lot of other substance abuse treatment programs are still there. Unfortunately, they're still funded largely at the levels that they tend to have been, though there are increases. Again, caveat, don't pay attention to what's coming out of the budgets right now because they don't really count until we've had that chance to go through this summer and figure out where road funding comes from. But there were some modest increases in SUD funding on top of simply opiates, but you're right. The sheer focus of opiates and the amount of federal dollars coming into that, both on the law enforcement end and the treatment end, I think have sort of shifted attention and funding largely to opiates to the detriment of some of the other ones. Hear you.
Getting back to the 298, so there's something that leads to a year delay and as far out as fiscal year 2022. So for that year delay, are they going to extend it to 23?
I would assume, but I don't know that. Yeah, that'll be what comes out in the boilerplate, and we haven't seen any of that yet. These are just kind of the big ideas of what we think will be in there.
So I look at this, if they're going to extend it to, if they're going to keep it to fiscal year 22, to me, I read that as a done deal. When you pick a date, sounds to me like it's a done deal, everyone's going to work towards that. Am I wrong?
Not necessarily. I see it differently. I see it as 4 more years that I can work on it, right? I mean, these are, it has suffered a hard 4 or 5 years already.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen with 298, but I can tell you that I like it better right now than I did 2 months ago, right? On the right way.
I do too.
Yeah.
Because I think once these big insurance companies are going to figure out what the administrative costs are, they're going to say, add profits that our board of directors want to that. It's a tough pill to swallow. And they're going to have a wake-up call then. I think wrong. What does it mean to us, Oakland County will be their pilot? I didn't understand that. And what does it really mean to us?
So that's different language. That's not 298. This is.
Yeah, I know. I was
this
just
is so
jumping
this
to
is the
next.
Oakland County or the OCHN language for integration, right? And because we don't want to foist that on other entities outside the county, right? It would make sense to do that in Oakland, frankly, because it's easier to get done, right? We can make that happen, we hope, we think. And so we'll run that, if it's not statewide, we run it as a single county pilot, right? A single entity pilot. So it just means that we're going to try this out for a couple of years and see what happens.
Already mentioned about auto fault and how does that affect the budget? Because you're laughing.
Only because that sucked all of my time up for a month and a half. There will be an incredible shift of people onto Medicaid because of some of the changes made to auto no fault. Because we are going to either make an unlimited benefit eventually unaffordable. Like I can buy an unlimited benefit still right now in some of the PIP plans that they've put together, right? And I can still do that, but less and less people may opt to do that, and that's going to, over time then, because that's how money works, become potentially unaffordable, especially as more people tend to want to buy the cheaper insurance because you never assume you're gonna get in an accident, right? So they're gonna buy the lower PIP, or they may even opt out in some circumstances. And when you start to then get into catastrophic auto accidents with a reduced benefit or the need to sue for benefits that are over a small amount of PIP that you bought, because we're returning to kind of a mini tort, if you will, or because of the ultimate death of some of the unlimited benefit over time, you're going to start to see potentially a big shift onto Medicaid, both styles of Medicaid plans, both the fee-for-service and the HMO style. That's why Blue Cross Blue Shield is at the table for the first time. Unfortunately, because that is still fresh, nobody has any idea of what that's going to look like. So I think your notion is probably correct, that there will be an uptick in maybe relevant to OCHN, brain injury services, right? And sort of dealing with some of the after effects of closed head injuries. And then a large shift onto Medicaid services simply because people are going to have to spend down their assets after a certain amount of time because your health benefits may not coordinate, they may not pick it up depending on the type of accident you had, or there's a benefit limit that you're going to run into over time.
What I'm hearing is it could definitely have an effect on the financial end for all PIPs. We're not in the business of serving those injuries.
Serving auto accidents yet.
Runsfeld. Jim Runsfeld? Yeah.
Runstead.
Runstead.
Yeah, sorry.
Runstead. What side is he on for Oakland County, or doesn't it have any, I don't want to put you on the spot on that, on the wording that I was about to say, but what's he doing for Oakland County?
Jim is a good advocate for you. Yeah.
I had to hear that. So generally, Dr. Gloom and Doom, I could assume that the funding is going to get scarce for PIPs going forward. I don't see any big funds coming our way.
IHPs? It's a hard question to answer. I mean, we don't know what they're doing with roads yet, and, you know, a lot of your funding is Medicaid. So, you know,
A squeeze and a competition
it's a hard
for more
question.
funds.
It's a hard question, and I don't want to lie to you or anything, so I'm not sure I can,
Oh, that's
answer
fine.
it.
It's fine. It's something that we just have to
Yes,
be
oh
aware
yeah,
of.
sure.
That's all.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Annette?
I just wanted to say, because I know what you're saying about doom and gloom, like, the financial picture doesn't look excellent at this moment, but we definitely have had some advocacy wins very, very recently. If you look at, and I do agree with you, Sid, when you talked about the Senate 298 language, put the fiscal year '22 as the rollout for privatization. One of the advocacy pushes has to be, when people are talking to their legislators, if it's supposed to be a pilot, make it a pilot. So the idea of a pilot is to roll something out and then compare the outcomes and the product and to the traditional model. So we have definitely had discussions about that. Language takes away the whole idea of it being a pilot, and it just then becomes a state rollout. So there's advocacy to be done around that. But we know advocacy can be effective. The 298 pilot rollout has been delayed 1 year. But probably more significantly, like Ben noted, the state had put a memo to CMS saying that they needed to revise our state waivers to include the privatization rollout via the pilots. And when they put out the memo saying to CMS, we're changing our waivers, they had to put it out for public comment. Now, it made its way through us, not directly, but through the grapevine, this public comment, and we immediately started distributing it to everyone. If you have anything you want to say about it, now would be the time to say something. Public comment ended June 11th. That was the last day for public comment. And as Ben said, we were just notified on Friday, it's being taken out of the waiver. So when things go to CMS and public comment comes in, when they submit the application to CMS, they have to summarize what the public had to say about the changes and what the state's response was. Now, you can look at why it was pulled out in a lot of different ways. I tend to think they got a lot of public comment saying privatization is not what the people want. So we heard Ben say it's been a really tough haul for the health plans to try and convince people. And they've convinced some. I mean, there's some really strong powers working towards privatization. But I think what we have on our side is the people we serve and the families and the advocates and the providers and everyone in this room, as far as I know anyways, has been very supportive of the publicly run, locally governed mental health system. So I do just want to say that advocacy is working for us, and we would hope that it would continue. If something's going to be a pilot, it needs to be a pilot and not a rollout.
No, I have a brief question. On people that have catastrophic injuries that have opted not to carry the extra insurance, how about Medicare? If they're like people my age, they're going to cover it.
Well, potentially, yes.
Any other questions for Ben and Noah? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we have some financial updates, and remember we're switching, we're going to do E before D, but Anya's going to be part of both presentations, so that'll give us some continuity.
The long haul for the night, so I just brought everything with me. You guys have in your packets the presentation that will be shared with you. So I'm going to turn it over and let Doug go ahead and go through.
Hi there. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I'm Doug Havera, the engagement partner on the audit of financial statements for the year ended September 30, 2018. What you have is the wrap-up booklet. Oh, gotcha. All right. Well, so this is a draft that we're going to issue upon your approval, but I'm going to flip through it and just go through. If you have any questions, you want to shout them out, that's fine, or if you want to wait till the end, that's fine as well. But the first page is the letter. It states these are required communications to those charged with governance, and that's why I'm here presenting to you tonight. Following that is the status of our audit. This is on page 3. I need a flashlight or my glasses, but this states that the objective of the audit is to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. We plan to issue a clean or unmodified or unqualified opinion on the financial statements. All records and information we received were freely available for our inspection, and we received excellent cooperation from Anya, Eddie, and the team, and management in general. Page 4 talks about the accounting practices and policies. There were no changes to the significant accounting policies for the year. And then corrected and uncorrected misstatements. There were no corrected misstatements. That means adjustments that we brought to the attention of management, and there was one proposed adjustment that we agreed was not material to the financial statements and was not made. 5 internal control for financial reporting. We do not issue a report on internal controls like a public company would, audit of a public company. We do look at internal controls, and should we find any recommendations, we would give these to you. And we did have one item that was noted, and that had to do, this is similar to last year, the ability to pay forms in regards to our testing, and management is aware and has responsive. Page 6, other required communications. I'm not aware of any other consultations with other accountants. No significant difficulties encountered during the audit. And then representations from management that I believe is attached to your draft as well. That's where management provides representations. They've supplied us with everything, answered all our questions truly, et cetera. Page 7 is our independence communication. We are required to be independent of the organization. We're confirming our independence from the date of the engagement letter to the date of the financial statements. And then for your heavy reading later, pages 8, 9, and 10, and 11 are GASB, so the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has pronouncements. When I started in July of 1990, there was 0, and now we're up to, what number does it say? Changes every day. 89. So management is looking at these. I do not think that there will be any impact to the agency's financial statement, but we're looking at those for, and they say when they're effective in there. Page 12 is cybersecurity. There's some links on here if you're interested. This is a very hot topic, along with in the corporate world, revenue recognition you may have heard, but cybersecurity is a hot topic. There's some things on, some resources we provide here, if anyone is interested. And then following that is the representation letter, which will be signed by management as I discussed, and the proposed adjustment is in here. Sign once we're ready to issue upon your approval. So, any questions? Oh, go ahead.
So I just want to go into the proposed adjustment that was identified was just an error in reporting with a provider that we chose to recognize in fiscal year 19 instead of fiscal year 18. Doug said did not have a material impact on the financial statement, so we chose to not. It's the one issue with the pay forms. So we got back, that's part of the compliance audit, not necessarily part of the financial audit. Per se, it's really part of the, when someone comes in without Medicaid or Healthy Michigan, they're required to have an ability to pay, which basically is a co-payment based on income. And when we did have this finding last fiscal year, so we were in the process of putting in a corrective action plan for last fiscal year when this was identified again in this fiscal year. So we're working on that corrective action plan for every provider identified that had the deficiency, and we'll be rolling that out within the next couple of months.
For you on the on that process for the self-pay. So is this, with the testing, does that mean there were 70 that were in the sample and we could only find 40? And then of the 40, 30 were incomplete? Or did that mean we were able to provide them 70 sample applications?
I believe they tested 70 was my understanding, and that 30 of them were incomplete. So remember that when someone, so when we had this finding last year, my response was it's immaterial because, you know, our very minimal amount of our revenue is actually general fund at this point. And so when you take that and then calculate someone's ability to pay and the amount that would actually be collected, it's not really material. Unfortunately, it is still part of our compliance exam. So again, hence the finding. So technically, we do have to do a corrective action plan and do expect providers that it's in their contract to do the form. So we will correct that with the.
We have a process to file, it just isn't being followed, pretty much? Okay, thank you, that was it.
Yeah, I said I got it.
So it's required within the core provider contracts that they fill that form out with a person. It is in our contractual requirement with the department that it is done as well. So ultimately, it is the state's requirement with us that we then delegate to the core providers.
Set up an accrual for that?
The providers are required to net any first and third-party revenue that they collect. So in that particular case, if they were to collect the copay, for lack of a better term, from someone, they would net that against our expenses. Remember, just on general fund, people with general fund, though, so the reality is we serve very few people on general fund anymore. The majority of the population we serve is on Medicaid or Healthy Mission.
Is there a delay in getting this out and completed? How long did it take to get this report completed, our audit?
When were we here? We were here in April for field work. Remember, you have the close with all the providers as well. So we were here, I believe, the second and third week of April, and we've been ready to issue. We're waiting for this board meeting basically to present, and then upon your approval, we're ready to issue. So it was.
Any delays is really at the provider level.
I want to clarify, they're not delays. I wouldn't call them delays. Our year-end process actually closes on February 28th. That's when our state reports are due, so that's always the date we're working towards. They really can't start their work until that's done. So the reality is they can't actually even start their work until after February 28th, so it's really not possible to do this much earlier. It would be them redoing work if they were to come prior to that February 28th date, because we are still compiling year-end reports with all the providers. So I wouldn't call it a delay, it's just that's the nature of the process, and that's when the state reports are due, so we really work from that date on both sides.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, because I sit on public boards, and you know, from a public standpoint, boy, that annual report is done by the first quarter of the next year, if you have a December 31st year end.
Public company? Right. Yeah, it's within, I believe, it's 60 days now they're issuing, but, yeah, they're due to the close of February 28th, and I mean, the process went very well from our standpoint.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of work to put
Her.
together the audit for both of
Her.
you. And to hear that, you know, it was great. It's wonderful to hear that it's easy to work with them. And I'm sure Annette was very helpful too. So I just have a little question though, and again, it's about page 5. So when you say it's like immaterial about, and that it's in the general fund, what's the approximate amount of money that's involved?
So if you were to, I'll kind of walk you through this a little bit. So remember, our general fund, we used to have a roughly $40 million of general fund. That's gone down now to roughly $12 million. The majority of that money is actually spent on spend downs, which gets someone to be Medicaid eligible. So if you were to subtract that roughly $3 million from that $12 million, plus the fact that we spend roughly $10 million, close to $10 million on state facility expenses and things like that. The reality is we're providing very little service to those that are on general fund. We actually discharged a fair number of them when we lost all that general fund. So you're talking about a very small subgroup. And then if then we were to calculate based on their income what their copay would be, you're talking a couple dollars if it were collected. The reality is we've never seen it collected that well. So that's why I say it's not material in a $350 million budget. Quite honestly, it's a lot of paperwork for a very little return from my perspective. There are other people that have similar perspective. However, it's still in our state contract, so technically we're still required to do it and have the providers do it.
I know it's going to be very time consuming, it sounds like, and something you have to do. But just because, you know, it was last year and it's this year, maybe, and it's going to take a couple months, like in October or November, when do you think would be reasonable to ask you if it's like been implemented to kind of get back to us on it, just because it's in here?
Yep, what we will do is we're putting corrective action plans in place and those will have a time frame, and then we will do our own testing prior to next year's audit to make sure that they're now being completed at an acceptable rate. So I would say If they, I would say before the next audit, I would expect to have testing done. So I would say sometime between November and December, I would expect that actual testing to take place to give them time to complete any that aren't done, and then for us to go and spot check so that when they get to the audit next year, we don't see this again. So I would try for December at the latest. Yeah.
Any risks, or did you opine on any risks that the organization faces?
Anya?
So we'll need a motion to approve this so they can finalize it. So I know this, the state is anxiously waiting for us to finish this, so.
Motion to approve the financial audit report has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay. I think I'm next again. Eddie can walk you out. Let me walk him out. Thank you. But just note, Eddie and his staff and Patrick and all of his staff all put in a lot of time and energy to this. Please don't think it was me. I'm mostly just up here talking, so it's mostly them. So I think we're going to move on. I'm going to try to skip back here. Bear with us a little bit. This process is slightly new, so I'm working on. Did I do it wrong? I'm hitting back arrow. So I think Christine can help me go back to financials. Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. So this is going to look just slightly different on the screen than you've seen it before. Your package still should look the same. The idea I think Christine had was that so people in the audience could actually read what was on the screen. So just bear with me. It's not in standard financial statement form up there, just that the numbers are bigger, so hopefully everyone can see it. So these are April financials, and we're looking at the statement of net position. And you can see between the two cash and cash equivalent accounts, we're at roughly $9 million. So what I want to make note of in this particular month is we paid the mortgage off in this month. So that did have an impact on cash, and it had an impact on some assets lower and long-term debt and things like that that I'll get into, but I do want to make you aware of that transaction happened on actually the 30th of April. So we wanted to make sure that happened in April because you remember we had some discussions with the bank about that happening related to the different covenants in the mortgage and things like that. So we wanted to make sure it did happen in April, and that did happen. So other than that, the other outstanding item that we've talked a little bit about recently was related to core provider cost settlements. Those were starting to come in small amount in late April. The largest of them came in early May, so you actually won't see that large one come in until the May statements. And then I'm working with a couple on them on paying those back over a couple month period, again, to make sure that we don't impact cash flow for provider agencies. I'm gonna, we'll see if it works this time. Jump to liabilities. So, moving on to liabilities, if you look down towards the mortgage note payable and mortgage note payable in the long-term liabilities, so what happened was not only did we pay off the mortgage in April, but they also took the payment prior to us paying it off and didn't net the difference. So we had the payoff amount. I don't know if you've ever had that happen. You had the payoff amount, they took the payment out, and then we paid it off based on the payoff amount. So you'll see those things get fixed in May. They did refund us in May. It was just a timing issue between the payoff amount we had and what the payment that had actually gone out in April that we paid, that we were paying every month. But in May, you will see this, those liabilities removed, both the short-term mortgage note payable and the long-term mortgage note payable are gone now that we've paid off the mortgage. So again, that did not have an impact on the overarching bottom line because it just moved the asset from a cash asset now to a long-term asset of the building that is now free and clear of any debt. Does that make sense before I move on to anything else? paid the mortgage off on April 30th. But everything will be cleaned up related to those negative numbers in the short-term and long-term liabilities in May because there was an extra payment in there, which we did get refunded in May. Moving on to net position. This is nothing unexpected here. What you will see going forward is once the audit is finalized, you will see the impact of the fiscal year 18 results hit our net position. So again, you'll see that. I'm assuming Eddie will have that ready for next month, so we'll see the impact of that hitting financial statements in May. So then moving on to, let me pause. Any questions before I move on? So if you recall, we did use reserves in fiscal year 18. So you'll see that it depends on which particular issue you're talking about, which reserves it hit. So remember, we did use some PA2, we did use some Medicaid, and we also used the local from the current fiscal year to cover the fiscal year 18 loss. So you'll see that wrap up in May of next year, or in May of fiscal year 19. All right, moving on to revenue. So the significant difference in revenue in April is that the direct care wage money started to come in. So remember, we budget on a 1/12 basis, so when we adjust revenue for budget amendment number 2, you will see this come more into line. We did not include the direct care wage increase in budget amendment number 1 because we hadn't actually seen it come in yet. So when we get ready to do budget amendment 2, you'll see that come more into line, but you will see that revenue is over budget for a change in April. So you'll see both in revenue and in expense that start to show up, and as we get closer to the end of the year and wrap up budget amendment number 2, you'll see the impact of that. So Medicaid and Healthy Michigan both will look a little over budget right now from a revenue perspective, but you can see over to the right there, we're almost exactly on budget for fiscal year to date, and that'll get even closer once we do budget amendment 2. That will include the revenue for the direct care wage adjustment that we started receiving in April. General fund, as I mentioned before, no change in that one. It's roughly $1 million a month. And then moving down to other, which is some of the smaller things, grants and things like that. You see the variances there because as we've talked before, it was the recommendation of the auditors that we don't necessarily accrue some of the grant revenue and things like that until it actually comes in, just from an ease of accounting perspective, rather than doing the in and out, just accruing it when or booking it when it does come in. SUD other, I will note, we have not yet received the second of the PA2 payments. So we're reaching out to the county to see when that is coming, because we should see it by this time of the year. Sometimes they sit on it a bit. That's not unheard of. So we're reaching out to them to find out where it is and make sure that we get that booked. But you'll see when that one does come in, it'll look way over budget for revenue because it does come in those 2 lump sums throughout the fiscal year instead of on a 1/12 basis like we see Medicaid revenue come in. You can see based on year to date, we're at about 1% off from the budget. And so again, once we get to budget amendment 2, those things will get even closer, and we'll expect them to be less. I would expect them to be less than 1% off from what we budget. On revenue before I move on. Expenses. So when you look at administrative expenses, you can see that we're under budget for salaries, and fringe is just slightly over, and then other administration is a little bit over this month, but what that is some annual like licenses and things like that we don't amortize, and we don't do that again because our auditors made the recommendation that for expenses under a certain threshold, we don't amortize just because it's not material enough to make the extra work worth it. So they hit in 1 month. So that's what happens, and that's what's going on in April, is that just some licenses we had to pay for on the administration side. When you move down to provider expenses, you'll see some of those look over for the month. That's because we pushed out the majority of the direct care wage payment for the remainder of the fiscal year in April. So the reason we do that is, one, to give cash flow out to the network, and two, because as we work through changing the rate methodology, we incorporate those changes in the direct care wage funding right in the rate methodology, but for a lot of these providers, the residential being the material one there, we have not done that yet. That's scheduled to take effect in October. And so as we move through any that are getting changed throughout the year, we are incorporating that. But what we don't want to do is hold off on that money throughout the fiscal year and then have those providers not be able to push that out to direct staff, so we just push it out up front. So it costs us the cash up front, we make up for it over the next few months, just to make sure that the network is getting the cash flow to be able to push out those direct care wage increases. So that's what you're seeing going on in April as it relates specifically to some of the overages you see in core provider, adults, residential, and some of those others that look a little over for the month. It's just us pushing that out so that they have the remainder of that in hand so they can add it to people's salaries. On that before I move on? I know that's a little. Moving down, none of the expenses otherwise look particularly off. You can see ABA is a little over budget, but that's primarily because we do expect an increase in ABA services throughout the year. We did budget for them. I would assume we will be adjusting ABA based on the trends we're seeing. ABA being the autism benefit. We'll adjust in budget amendment number 2. The only other one I really want to make note of is you see purchase service other. That one's typically one that we don't see have a consistent expense, but what I will note that was also noted in the audit report is that's where we booked the adjustment that we found from 18 in 19. That's where we booked it. So we had to book it in 19, and that's where it made the most sense for now to book it. So that's why you see that one look so over for this particular month, is because we booked that particular entry in fiscal year 19. On expenses. After that is the standard statement of cash flow, which just reconciles the amount of cash pushed out the door to the actual expenses that are booked on our books, and then also change in net assets. So other than that, does anyone have any questions related to April financials?
So, talk about the investments. Investments are priced market to market, right? There's $1 million loss in the value for the month of April, correct?
Let me back up a second. You're looking at investments for April? What particular statement are you looking at? So I'm making sure.
Well, I'm looking at the net position. My concern is, and help me understand it, have you sold any maturities during the last 3 months?
We don't, as a general rule, sell maturities early ever. So if we have during this transition, because we did choose a new investment company, if we have things that are maturing, we will take the cash, but we do not sell them early and take the loss. This is just about performance.
Right. So what do you plan? Let me say it differently. So you have some maturities coming due within the next 2 weeks. What is the plan for investing those dollars?
So while we're during this transition period where we're going from one investment company to the other, we do not have the old investment company reinvesting on our behalf because of the complicating factors with the custodial versus the investor.
Don't even say anymore. That's the thing that I was concerned about.
So we are not allowing them to
Because
reinvest.
interest rates are coming down.
Right. So we are not having them reinvest for us right now.
What decision? Thank you.
All right, so you just talked about, you hinted at that we've just selected a new custodian That was the earlier this year RFP process, right?
We chose a new investment company,
Right.
yes.
We also have another RFP out there for our auditors.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we stand on that one?
I believe the RFP committee met today, and they have their results. They have not been shared yet with anyone, to my knowledge, so those will be forthcoming. I would imagine you'll get an update from Annette with the selected vendor prior to them, but we usually will wait to notify everybody kind of. Not on financials.
Right. We have the next presentation by Anya and Vicki Suter.
I was up here for the long haul, I wasn't joking. And talk. I can't take notes and talk either. Okay. The long-awaited peer presentation. So Vicki and I have been kind of trying to put this together for several months now and kind of pull some data and gather some data from providers. And so what you're looking at is the peer service presentation. Vicki, I guess I'll let you start.
Since we have some new board members, I'll introduce myself. I'm Vicki Suter, the Director of Rights and Advocacy. I also am the peer liaison for peer support services and peer mentors to the state of Michigan and to our provider network. So a peer service is a service given by an individual who has lived experience. In this report, we're going to be talking about peer support specialists. So those are individuals that have experience getting services through the public mental health system and have a serious mental illness. I believe in fiscal year 18 was the first year we fully had implemented the new models, the new payment models. So there was some question about what is happening with peer services. It appeared that individuals anecdotally were not getting we were not giving out the same number of encounters that we had in the previous year. So hence the questions came up, what's going on with peer services? Could we look at the data and make some determination from that? So we will be presenting to you the data that we've collected for the past 3 years in comparison, how many individuals got a peer service in that particular year, and then also what was the average unit that a person received per month. We're looking at our adult providers of mental illness and then also Common Ground. Common Ground is going to be a little bit different. They're not under the payment model, the new payment models, and we'll talk about Common Ground differently. So our first one is CNS Healthcare, and as you can see from the graph, the bar graph is indicating, and I'm going to concentrate mostly on the last 2 years. So 2017 is sort of the orangey color, and then 2018 is the gray color. So good news there are more individuals receiving a peer service. A peer service is a Medicaid billable service, but also there are peer services that can occur that aren't necessarily under the Medicaid. All services that a peer gives is a valuable peer service. So as more individuals get a peer services, that is a good thing. If we look at the other graph on the right, 2017 is in blue, and so that's indicating the average units that a person who got a peer service got per month. So you see it's around 10 units per month, and then it dips towards that last quarter of 2017. 2018 is in green, and you can see that level is quite a bit below what was in 2017, right around 4 units per month. So the average that a person's getting of a peer encounter has decreased, at least for CNS Healthcare, based on this data.
However, the number of people receiving a peer service has gone up well over 400.
Right, which is a good thing.
As far as average unit, is that like hour, half hour, or
15-minute unit?
15? Okay, thank you.
Easter seals, same graph. If we look at the bar graph, 2017 is again in the orangey color,
And then 2018 is in the gray color. We can see Easter Seals had a little bit of increase of number of persons getting to peer services, but it's pretty close to about the same. If we look at the average unit per month, 2017 is in gray, and you can see that averages between 10 and 8. And 2018 is in yellow, and that is a little bit below what it was in 2017, ranging from probably 7 to 6 units per month, average units per month.
You know why there's such a difference?
That's in a couple of slides. We wanted to just give you the data first and then go back and kind of talk about the whys.
Right, training and treatment innovations. Again, the bar graph 2017 is in orange. You can see there was a significant number of people got a peer service. 2018, there was a dip in relation to a number of people who got a peer service. We'll talk about why that is in a minute. If we look at the average unit, 2017 is the green line, the blue line, 2018 is the green line. For training and treatment innovations, their average unit didn't really change too much. It's very similar. If we look at Common Ground, who provides crisis services for us, we'll see in 2017 is the orange line, and 2018 is the gray line. So there looks like that individuals that got a peer services did decrease. This is only accounting for a Medicaid peer service. Okay, and that'll be important because we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So if we look at the average number of units on the blue, 2017, sort of up and down, but around 2.5, and then 2018 is green. It's similar. So the average unit didn't change too much for Common Ground. Just to talk about Common Ground a little bit, impact on peer data. So they did have a number of individuals that are getting the Medicaid peer services seem to have reduced in 2018. And when I talked to Common Ground, there was a number of reasons why that occurred. They had changed their delivery model that impacted that peer encounter data. So overall for Common Ground, they're still providing basically the same amount of peer service. It's the amount of Medicaid billable peer service that's being provided that has changed for them. That's because they changed the delivery model. They changed one certified peer position to what's called a milieu position, and that person does not record encounter data. They don't do notes. They do more of floating around the unit, making sure that things are calm and working on a variety of things. So they're not assigned to an individual. They also use certified peer support specialists for registration and welcoming as individuals come in for crisis services, which is a good thing, but that is not one that is Medicaid billable, so it's not going to show up in the data that we're presenting you today. They had indicated that they had 1,000 more people come to seeking services in 2018, which then means peers are doing more welcoming and registration because you have more individuals walking in the door. So they're still using many peers overall. It's just not necessarily a service that requires documentation and coding. 12 of their 32 peers work in positions that require a peer support services documentation and coding. In order to bill Medicaid peer service, you have to have completed the Michigan certification process. And so they're not tracking and recording any non-certified peer service that's being delivered at Common Ground. And then the core provider impact on peer data, they had indicated that the turnover rate was around 20+% for peers in 2018. As we mentioned, peers do have to go through a certification process that typically can take up to 4 months to complete. You have to be working as a peer at least 3 months. Then you go through the training. That takes about a month to get that completed. And then also peers are doing significant amount of indirect work that assist individuals, but that's not recorded on that Medicaid data.
So I'm going to ask a quick question. Would it be better for us to first kind of explain what Vicky's referring to when she says Medicaid billable versus non-billable before I jump into kind of the plans for 19 and 20 to kind of make sure we're not only providing as much peer service as possible, but also capturing the data? Or would you rather me go through this and then kind of circle back? What would be more helpful for you guys? Nobody has a? Okay. Okay. So when Vicky references Medicaid billable service, so essentially, in order for someone to provide a peer service, they have to be a certified peer. So there's an entire state process that someone has to go through to become a certified peer. So once that includes working as a peer in a particular job for a period of time and going through the state required certification. But that doesn't mean that during that time period that they're not actually providing what's considered a valued, and people say billable because it means we were able to report an encounter. Just because they're not certified doesn't mean that they're not doing the work. It just means that it doesn't create an encounter. So essentially, from my perspective, it becomes an indirect cost. So it gets a cost for that person that gets layered on to the billable service that is produced by someone who is certified. Does that make sense, or do I need to explain that a little differently? So essentially, we have peers that work in the system that have not been certified, that are paid through the system. It just doesn't produce an encounter. It gets layered onto the cost of someone that does produce an encounter because they have been certified.
The other piece to that is even if a peer is certified, but they're doing something that is not listed in the peer Medicaid in the Medicaid manual that is listed as a peer service, that's can be billable as an encounter, then they can't use that particular Medicaid code. They have to use some other code or maybe an indirect. So there is two components to that as well.
So there's a couple of things we're doing in fiscal year 19 and now planning in fiscal year 20 to not only capture that data, but to make sure we are reimbursing for those situations so we can encourage the use of even non-certified peers while they're getting certified or in other positions that are valued. So one of the things what we're doing is sharing this data with the core providers. And what we've also done, and what we talked about actually in fiscal year 19, and was capturing the data for non-certified peers utilizing the same code, but adding a modifier so that they can actually report that code to us. We don't report it to the state because it's not technically a billable encounter. But what that does is it can trigger payment, and it can allow us to capture the data to know the true amount of peer services that are going on within the network. So that's one of the things we're adjusting for fiscal year 19. And then, so going into fiscal year 20, we'll be continuing that, and we've also added a peer incentive to both targeted case management and specialized residential service models for each provider providing providing services to adults with mental illness. If they increase the number of peer encounters by 25% in 2 consecutive quarters, they get the milestone payment of $7,500, and then they get a second milestone payment if they increase it for 2 consecutive quarters by 35%. Again, to encourage, that will count for both certified and non-certified peers. So we're not going to delineate necessarily between the certified and non-certified because we, of course, believe that those are both valuable services. So that's, again, another encouragement for them to utilize both certified and non-certified peers. Does anybody have questions? Okay.
There's peers providing service that are not certified, so that cannot be billed for, but it's layered on top of the peers that are certified.
We're separating that out where non-certified can be reported to us and billed. We just don't then report it on to the state because it's not allowable for to send the Medicaid encounter to the state for that, but that doesn't mean we don't pay for it. It means we pay for it and we don't report the encounter and we layer those costs onto the direct certified peers.
I believe the way the payment model works is if an individual, a person getting served, receives at least one peer service, then they're paid for that case. They're paid the rate for the month. You only have to have one encounter to trigger the payment.
Right. You
We're
can
going to
only,
start, we're going to start paying whether they have completed certification or not. So remember that 3 months that people have to work and then they go through the training? Historically, we did not pay for those 3 months or even the month during training. But now, if they're providing a peer service, even though they don't have the certification, we're going to pay. Because the providers are reporting that's one of the problems with recruiting and bringing peers on. It's such a long process. They felt they were losing money in the process of bringing peers on. We wanted to get rid of that barrier. So that's a major change we're making, that we'll be paying prior to the certification.
And in addition, we are encouraging the increase in the number of peer encounters. That's what the incentive is about. It's specific to encounters, not people. So while someone could see more people and get the payment to earn this particular incentive, this is about the number of encounters that are received, the increase of 25 and 35%. So it's not about the number of people increasing, it's the number of encounters increasing.
Data shows us that in general, the average encounter an individual receives of peer services has decreased from 17 to 18. It tells us that, but we don't know why. The data doesn't tell us why that occurred. All services are driven by person-centered planning. So whatever's in a person's plan should be what they are receiving.
but when the payment models came in, it was my understanding that when a peer provides a service to a person, that they only get paid for that one individual for the months one time. So if they saw them more than once during the course of that month, they would not get a payment. Is that true or not?
So that is correct, but the payment is incorporating well over one 15-minute unit. The payment is over $500 a month per person. So we took the average cost per month per person, and that is the payment that is received if you see that person one time. So it was intended to be about flexibility and to make sure that the payment was received and not about volume, but really about the needs of the person. Unfortunately, I think there are situations where that model was interpreted and not necessarily focusing on the number of services being received and more about the people. That's why we're moving this to be more focused on the number of encounters increasing versus the number of people.
Payment model really is built on, not that everybody gets one encounter, but everybody gets what is required in the person-centered plan.
Right.
So, if you're going to pay for one 15-minute encounter, then you'd probably pay $20, So that $500 payment is built around the fact that, some people might require 10 units in a month. Somebody might require 20. Some people might require one. So there's all this variability of what someone would need, but the model is built around that based, I believe, on some historical data.
It was based on the historical expense per person per month, the actual expense per person per month.
Okay.
I got a little confused too, so I'm going to ask a couple questions. So you're saying if somebody, and first of all, it makes complete sense to see the person as many times as they need to be seen, and that's all what we want to do. So actually, let me just back up a little bit. Where is the funding coming when they're not certified? I know if they're certified, it comes from Medicaid, so you've got money, but where does the money come when they're not certified?
That's where it goes to back. It's we layer those costs on to the certified encounter. So the reality is the payment is a per member per month payment, and it incorporates not only the certified peer seeing someone, also the non-certified peer. So those costs are layered on as indirect costs. So let's say the direct peer face-to-face time costs $20 per 15-minute unit. We would layer on another, let's say, $10 to $15 to each unit to cover the non-certified peer. Does that make sense? It's a little, it's
Are you allowed to do that? I mean,
Yep.
it makes sense,
Yep.
but you're basically taking your funding for Medicaid and splitting
Yep,
it up, is what you're
yep, we're
saying.
allowed to have indirect costs. Yep,
Okay.
it's totally allowable. That's what we do with, like, let's say, a support staff. A support staff that's supporting a case manager is an allowable indirect cost. It doesn't produce an encounter, but it's an allowable cost.
And that's coming from the state or coming from the county, or where's that?
It's Medicaid.
It's all Medicaid, okay.
Yep, it
Okay,
just,
so now
it
I
doesn't
understand
produce an
that.
encounter, so we don't call it billable, which the reality is, it is billable as an indirect cost. It's just doesn't produce an encounter.
How are we motivating, whether you're the peers, to see the individuals more than once a month? How are we motivating them?
As Vic mentioned, the expectation by all core providers is that they're serving people based on their plan.
Let's say the person's plan is like 20, let's just say.
The expectation is, because that's identified as a medically necessary service in their person-centered plan, the expectation is they are providing that, and we have audits that test for that. So what we're doing is making sure that we're encouraging that behavior by now incentivizing an increase in the encounters, both certified and non-certified.
What if the peer doesn't come 20 times? What happens? Like, how are you, monitoring it, whether they do it or not?
So I would say that when UM and UR do their, UM do their audits, they would go in and check utilization of an authorization. So if someone was authorized for 20 units per month, and then they consistently see that someone is providing only 5, then that becomes a question in an audit of why do you have such a high authorization and then low utilization?
So, like, that person is still a peer? I mean, I'm just trying to understand how it works. Like,
So if they're authorized for 20 and they only get 10, eventually through the audits, that would be noticed. And so you're not giving the individual what they're authorized for. And so they're asked about that through different other types of audits, not a financial audit.
It wouldn't be in the financial side of.
okay, and then just explain the $500. So it's $500 a month per peer. Let's just, is that what
Oh,
you're
no,
saying?
it's $500 per person seen per month. So if I'm a peer and I see 10 people a month, I get 10 $500 payments, whether I see them once or whether I see them 10 times each.
Where is that a motivation? I don't really
So
get
the
that
idea behind
concept.
the idea behind that is it's per member per month. So the goal is not to pay based on volume, because I don't want you to be served only because I see you face to face. If a phone call is what you need, then that's what you should get. So what we did is take the historical cost of the average person per month, and that is now the per member per month payment that you get, even if you're seen once. The goal is flexibility and focusing on that person's needs, not necessarily the reporting requirements.
Right. Someone's individual plan of service is not built on the payment models.
I understand.
So it's built, so as a provider, you can't be saying, oh, I'm only going to give you one peer service, because that's what to trigger a payment. I have to say, what does that individual need? I need to see you once a week for an hour. You would like to come to a peer group, okay? Those are part of your plan. The expectation is all those services would be given to that individual. And the way they created the model payment, should be enough funds to cover all of that. And everybody's going to be different based on their plan.
One final question. How many peers, and I may have asked this before, but how many peers do we have?
I'm going to say around 60 certified peers. I haven't counted them lately.
And how many people are they serving?
Oh, so you can see that's.
Yeah.
If these were by actual numbers, or they were by, it looks like it is, but then you said something about Easter seals and thousands, so there's no thousands, so I kind of got confused. So these are by month?
Yes.
Number of people served per month.
Okay. Right. I got it. I can add that up.
So we need to have a conversation with the providers to say, hey, your per units have really decreased from one year to the next. Why is that? Are people getting what's in their plan? And for some other individuals, the number of people who got a peer services decreased. And so why is that? What's going on?
I have another question too. Where does productivity fit into all of this?
We don't dictate productivity standards for any core provider. That
I'm
would,
not saying that you do, but you're saying that there's a payment made per person, per month, and out of that is to cover all of the services that that person provides to that individual for the month, whether it's one face-to-face or 12 for a group. But then you still have to account for productivity, whether it's different at every agency, I don't know. That's not my purview. I don't know. But still, if I'm required to produce, and I don't know how to explain this because I don't do that work, but I know productivity plays a role in why, and this is my opinion, why the number of accountants are going down and the number of people being served are going down. Because it was my understanding when we started this process that people had to meet a certain number of people to make sure that let me say it this way, there was some confusion. Because people were being told you only get paid for one person per month, so you could only see that person one time in the month.
That would be
I would say that's a
incorrect.
misinterpretation of the intent of the model. The model was intended to allow flexibility and not dictate the
Yes.
number of people that are supposed to be seen.
Service models or payment models do not dictate what a person needs for their services.
I understand
I
that.
know,
I
know.
understand
And I hear
person-centered
what
planning.
you're saying, so that would have to be addressed, because that would be totally against what we're supposed to be doing.
I guess I'm frustrated because I'm asking the same questions that I asked when we first started this model. And I still don't understand.
The only thing we've gotten from understanding is anecdotal things that have been told to us as to why that's changed. That's why our next plan is to talk to the core providers. If there's something specific we need to address with them, we can have that conversation. But the model is never intended to dictate what services someone gets. And that's not at all the intent. If that's how it's being interpreted, we can certainly clarify that. But what we can tell you is we're trying to put things in place to make sure that we're not inadvertently discouraging multiple services in a month. The goal was to pay for the average number and the average expense. Now we're going to separate that for certified and non-certified so that we make sure people are getting paid for non-certified as well. But if there's some additional misinterpretation with how the model was to be rolled out or how people are expected to be served, then that's something we would have to clarify.
A lot of my questions were already answered, but I just want to go back to the turnover rate that was significant, that was marked. What was that percentage again, you said?
Around 20%.
Okay, on 20%. And that was because those individuals, many of them, were not certified and the certified process was taking place?
Those individuals left employment at that particular agency, either because they have got different jobs or.
So we did ask the core providers why some of this was going on, and again, it's anecdotal, so you see us hesitating to say that just because we don't have any necessary data points that measured specifically that. But from what they say is that the job market is very good. They have people that get certified and then leave.
But I will say I have raised this very issue because I know what the success data is on employment of folks that we serve, particularly folks with mental health needs. And if the data on employment of people we serve showed that all the people we serve are employed and nobody needs a job, I would see that as a satisfactory answer. We know there's 80% of the people we serve unemployed. So I have a hard time believing there's no peers that are applying or wanting the job. And I don't know, maybe Milkai has more insight. They're saying that they can't get people to apply. So when somebody leaves and vacates a peer position, TTI has had an open position for many, many months. They say they get no applicants. I've really pushed them on that because I'd said, one, they were not drawing from people that they personally serve. They were making a business decision to say they were only going to hire peers that were supported by CNS or peers supported by Easter Seals. They were not going to hire peers supported by TTI. I think that's limiting their pool and resources and proximity to where people live, which could have been a challenge. And I've encouraged them that there's nothing saying you can't hire peers that you are supporting within your own agency. So we've had a lot of tough conversations, and I don't want you to think that we're happy about this data. We're not. But I don't want you to think that fee-for-service reimbursement is the best business practice model either. These models of case rates per person per month, I mean, this is what we're supposed to be doing with managed care. And obviously, if there was some kind of intent to say each person was only supposed to get one per month, the rate wouldn't have been set at 500. So we had an expectation of people being served multiple times throughout the month. And I've said in other forums, I'm happy to sit down with CEOs, and now that we have the data in front of us, and say, your data makes it look like we're paying $500 for one contact per month, and it's not the intent of the model. So we're going to have some tough conversations with this. We're not happy with the data. And we're looking at other ways to utilize peers, too. If it's not being maximized by delegating it through our core provider agencies, we can find ways to employ peers in other avenues and other ways through our network. So we're not opposed to looking at that as well.
Is there any data from the individuals using the peers, utilizing the peers to know like their satisfaction with service, if that has something to do with?
I don't have that data. I'm not sure if that's included in one of our other types of audits
Okay.
related to programming or services.
Is it something that's asked? I mean, is there a
I'm
survey?
not sure.
direct-
There's
oh, you don't
like
know. Okay.
satisfaction surveys done, but I don't recall what all those questions are on that satisfaction survey, if they talk specifically about a particular service or not. But, yeah, I mean.
Anecdotally, people speak very highly of peer
Yeah.
supports. That's why we value it. Often people say it's the most impactful service they receive.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that it is. Maybe I posed my question wrong, but I guess just trying to find out the underutilization. So is there a reason that they're not utilizing it? Is there some
Right,
type of
that's-
survey that can be adjusted to them? Because I think it is a very important aspect and a very good model, but where is this disconnect? And maybe looking at the individual's perceptions rather than.
Or we may have to dig a little deeper in other types of data, like individual plans of service, authorization versus utilization, or have authorizations significantly changed from one year to the next because of, so this tells us kind of what's happening, it doesn't tell us why, and we've got to figure that out.
So I was quickly looking through these slides and looking at the data, and it looks like Easter Seals, TTI, and Common Ground all, the number of people they served were half by 50%, or cut by 50% or half, where CNS pretty much grew a little bit, grew by a third. So I think that's sort of interesting in terms of the dynamics, even though the number of persons, the average number of units per month didn't vary that much from roughly 4, 5, 6, under 10. And I was also curious, just like Sarah, because I know that anecdotally, these kind of services have been really good. Yes, that's all I've ever heard. But I wondered how we did measure success, or on improvement if we were doing it. I know we have the annual survey that folks could do, but that's a point in time. That's not, if you ask me on a particular day, if you're asking once a year, I may have my good day and I answer really nicely, or I may have my really horrible day and I answer really poorly. But if you ask me 12 times a year, once a month, you can throw out the high, you can throw out the low, and you can see what's in the middle in terms of data. So I wondered if we have something that can measure that, not with the peers, but with the persons being served. So it's independent of the people providing the service. There's no direct relationship to the, if you will, like the fee for service, like the service being occurring, but you get the insights, you get the insight from the person receiving the services, how valuable it is to them and how. And then, as you were saying before, about looking at plans, I don't know if the plans are electronic or if that's going to take manual abstraction to understand, you know, if you're going to do plan audits or a sampling to see, you know, how many types of services or needs in the peer space were they looking for or needed based on their specific plan. So I know that can get really tough without some sort of natural language processing software that can read through a plan if it's not truly some sort of electronic, which I don't think our plans are. So
Our authorizations and utilizations are, we would have data on the certified service right now. The uncertified gets harder to capture because it doesn't have a code tied to it.
So there is over and underutilization audits that are done. If there have been specific to peers, I couldn't answer that question right now. I guess our point really was, this is kind of a starting point for us to kind of say, we can see that there's been a dip. We obviously want to better capture the data, but that's going to take us some time to kind of dig into that and kind of find some of the whys, some of the conversations with whether it's CEOs or whomever to kind of understand better what's going on. Like we said, a lot of it's anecdotal right now. So, you know, without having real data to support the whys, we don't really have those right now.
not counting the uncertifieds as well, even if we can't bill for them.
Right, they're still
we
valuable
should
and we still want to
them.
count them. That's why we're going to do that and we're going back with fiscal year 19 to allow for that. And then going forward, we'll have a better understanding of what's actually going on, certified or not, so.
Have to bundle it as an ancillary support.
Yeah, and those are things I can do on the back end.
Do you have the numbers of turnover prior to the payment models were instituted? Is that 20+% now? Was it more, was it less prior to the models?
I don't
Don't
have that
know.
information, yeah.
I have to say that I don't know all the reasons, but there seems to be a job dissatisfaction because if you love your work, you're not going to leave it. And I don't understand, too, why more people, because I run into people all the time that say, I want to work in the system, I want to give back to the system that helped me. But I also know that there are certified peers who have left this system and went to the Medicaid health plans because it paid more money. So my question, one of the questions I have, I know we can't pay any more money, but I still would like to know about job satisfaction, not just for the peers, but for the case managers and support coordinators also. Because if you like your work, it's not always about the pay. And if they're leaving in record numbers, that's speaking volumes to me.
Add a comment as well. That was one of the other things that I was thinking of too, is agreeing with Melkaya that, you know, the rate of pay and what are we paying. When I look at retention rates and I see such a high rate of turnover, that's one of the first things that come to mind and that people think about, you know, if you do love your job. But at the end of the day, people also need to be able to have a living wage and make money and be able to do what it is that they want to do. So I think maybe part of the job satisfaction could have something to do with possible pay or whatever is involved with it, but because that turnover rate is high, it's significant.
I would want to compare it. I'm not sure it's different than other agencies throughout the state, large PHP networks. And anecdotally, it's my understanding that for the providers, there are other positions that also have higher turnover, not just the peer position.
And we appreciate any advocacy anybody wants to do with regard to the underfunding of the system, because I think we all acknowledge that we would have less turnover and greater satisfaction if we had more resources.
Bring up great questions and comments about the data, and we've got to do some additional work.
Now we have the reports from RRAC, CAC, and the Oversight Committee. So Recipient Rights Advisory Committee, Jonathan?
The Recipient Rights Advisory Committee met on June 6th at 5:30. Amit Agarwal was our vice chair. He is our vice chair. He was the facilitator. There was a welcome of new members, one of them being Lois Schulman, who is a past board member here. Christine Burke, who's our Director of Communications for OCHN, was our guest speaker. She presented on two topics, community outreach and of communications. Community outreach and communications, and the Wellness Center, doing really well tonight, sorry. The Wellness Center facility is now staffed. It's available to the folks we serve. Groups such as some of the clubhouses have already been using the facility, as I understand it, every Thursday afternoon. From the communications perspective, Christine talked about the idea that OCHN fields approximately 300,000 calls every year. That's roughly 70,000 calls for each subpopulation we serve. There was a significant amount of dialogue with our committee and her. She did a marvelous job of fielding a lot of the questions. One question that was outstanding was about the access at the call center and its stats. And so it will be a future topic, but they were curious to know how many calls and length and hang-ups and things like that that happen at the access center and that common ground. So it would take a whole nother topic one night. So Jean Fender is our manager Office of Recipient Rights, presented on the topic of self-determination. So from a rights perspective, or rights and challenges, it's really a way of doing things, not just a program here at OCHN. Determination helps drive determining the services array, a person's specific or direct service providers that they want to use, and the relationship and the management of those folks that serve them, if you will. While Jean had some personal experience with it because she has a family member, there were others on our committee that also are in self-determination. But that's such an odd way to call it. They manage the care and the services and the people that they use and choose to use. Their supports, yes. So they manage those folks. And it's not a trivial effort because they're doing this without a support coordinator. They're hiring the people they want to hire. They're managing the people they want to provide the service for them. They track the timesheets. They do approvals. They have to file it. They have to have their own tax ID. They are running essentially a small business with just, a subset with some number of employees. That's essentially what they have. And then they have someone else, an accountant essentially, a fiduciary intermediary, who's writing the checks for these folks and pulling the Social Security and the FICA and all those benefit, all of those taxes, if you will, for their EIN number or their business tax ID. So it is a small business, but they've chosen to go that way, and I think that's pretty cool. But it's not easy. Jean also reported on the rights conference that's coming up that's this week on Friday. From 10 to 3, there will be a keynote speaker. I actually know who he is. He's our vice chair. So Amit is going to be speaking at it, and there's going to be 3 breakout sessions. There was also some other ORR updates. One of our staff is going on family leave, FMLA. That means that their staff is going to be below the number we normally have. That means that it's going to put a strain on the team to do the investigations on a timely basis. But I'm hoping that they're up to snuff and they can do that because the state really knocks us every time an investigation goes over 90 days. And Jean knows that, Vicki knows that, and the crew. So I know they're going to be diligent about that. The reports project continues. Its purpose is to refine and make the incident reports investigations a little bit more readable. Currently, they use numbers for every individual, so you have no clue whether you're dealing with, when you're reading an incident, whether it's about the individual, one of the support groups, anything, everything, everyone's a number, and no one's really a number in real life, so it's really hard to understand what's in those. So they're fixing that process. No one else in the state files them by that, anyhow. So they at least would say person A, served by person B, at facility C would be a little bit better than person 1, 2, 3 was being seen by 4, 5, 6. It's just a mess. Anyhow, the recipient rights team also continues to improve the relationships with staff at a lot of the facilities. They visited more than 60 locations this year just to build relationships, okay? So that's on top of the mandatory on-site inspections that we do, where at least for this year, we have to do 445 of them, and they've done 324, or 72% of them so far this year. At the rate they're going, they will complete them all on time, as expected. So state expects us to do it, and we always do that. So there's no appeals report. And then for upcoming meetings, normally we meet the first Thursday of the month, but traditionally we do not meet in July, so there will be no July first Thursday of the month meeting, but we will have our next one rather early in the summer for August. It's August 1st. So if anyone would like to attend, it's on Thursdays across the hall from here at 5:30. So please join us. That's it.
Next, from the Citizens Advisory Committee, Malkiah.
I have two reports because I was not able to make the May meeting. Citizens Advisory Report for April 17th. The meeting was called to order by the chair, Glenda Vidosh. Minutes from the March 20th meeting were approved and there was no public comment. There was a very emotional farewell to former board member and board CAC liaison Lois Schulman. Board Chair Judy Summers spoke about the service that Lois performed on behalf of the OCHN board, and she also announced that Malkiah Newman would be serving temporarily as liaison. Many committee members shared of how much of an impact Lois had on their lives and the lives of the people we serve in general. Her presence and service in this capacity will be missed, but she has committed to serving as an advocate in the interim, and refreshments were served. Susan Stevens made a presentation about complex case management, a program designed to provide comprehensive care coordination for those served by our system who have multiple complex needs. To participate in this To participate in this program, a person would have to have Medicaid, have to have an open case with OCHN, and have high utilization of emergency rooms and multiple hospitalizations. The program is accepting new referrals, and they can come from family members or other interested parties who feel that a person would benefit from the additional support and care coordination this program provides. David Hornerbrook from the Quality Department gave a demonstration of the Community Electronic Health Record, the CEHR. The CEHR is located on the OCHN website under Access Services. He was looking for feedback from the committee to help staff provide a better experience for the people that we serve accessing the CEHR. Christine Burke gave an update on the upcoming Walk a Mile in My Shoes rally May 9th, encouraging as many as can to come and let their voices be heard. Various members gave their reports to the committee, and the meeting was adjourned. Respectfully submitted, Malkiah Newman. Citizens Advisory Council report for May 21st. The meeting was opened by the chair, Glenda Vidosh, welcoming all members and guests. Minutes of the last meeting were approved. 2 people spoke in public comment. One was concerned about the condition of the OCHN parking lot, and the other suggestion was made to make Lois Schulman a member at large of the CAC. Executive Director of OCHN, Annette Downey, shared about keeping people first in the public mental health system while building bridges to expand healthcare collaboration. She has shared the effects that budget cuts have had on Oakland County and the need to find ways to minimize the negative effects on the people we serve. She also shared the current priorities of OCHN: self-determination, innovation, value-based outcomes, collaboration, and healthcare integration. Annette also spoke about the promising work that OCHN has been doing with the Care Connect 360 pilot. It's a tool that enables OCHN and the Medicaid health plans to better coordinate care and improve service delivery. OCHN has been encouraging the state legislature to consider implementing Care Connect 360 as an alternative to the efforts to privatize the system through 298. She also shared that the state is putting forth an amendment to our waiver request to the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services that would include permission to proceed with the privatization of the mental health system. There's a 30-day comment period for public comment that ends on June 11th. Anyone wishing to make comments needs to submit them to CMS by the deadline. Deborah Moreau spoke about the new independent facilitation services that are now being provided by OCHN. People who serve as independent facilitators would assist people served by our system with the person-centered planning process. Anyone interested in additional information can contact Deb Moreau. There was further discussion by the members about making Lois Schumann an at-large member of the CAC. A committee was formed consisting of Malkia Newman, Victoria Landsman, Liz Janovitz, and Jackie Heller to review the bylaws and give recommendations to the committee at the June meeting. Various members gave their reports to the committee, and the meeting was adjourned. Respectfully submitted, Malkia Newman.
Next, reports from the Oversight Policy Board Committee, which is the Substance Use Disorder Committee.
With the Substance Use Disorder Board, there's three inherent conflicts that are going on, not with our board, but in the field. One of which is with, as relates to kids, the legalization or the relaxing of the laws, now 33 states in the country, was not meant for kids to be running around using marijuana and CBD. However, that's an issue that has evolved, and the problem that we have is that anybody who's under age 25, they're really putting their brain in peril, because we now know that the brain continues to develop to at least age 25. We used to think it was like 18, then it was 21, now we know it's 25, and they're doing considerable harm to the brain and retarding development of their cognitive abilities. So that's one, kids using it when that was not the intention. The other thing that's going on is the money that's related in this. I mean, obviously there's a big profit motive in this, and people who are selling it can make $1 billion. So, and then the state collects $250 million in tax revenue. So nobody's running to the legislator to try to, slow that down. If anything, they're trying to speed it up. So that's been a problem. The CDC is concerned about that, as they are about the kids who are using the marijuana and CBD. And then finally, the law. Even though the states have relaxed or they've decriminalized it or made it legal, the federal law still remains there. So literally what we have sometimes are grandmas, being put in handcuffs and dragged off to the police department for a violation of federal law. I don't know how they resolve that once they get that and what they do in terms of booking, but at least there's that in-between problem between, being discovered, being handcuffed, and then what happens after that. People think that they can just walk around with it, like in their purses or in their pockets or in their glove box of their car. That isn't true. If you go to the airport and you've got CBD or marijuana on you, you probably will be arrested. So it's not a free ticket to be able to walk around with it. true that, the research shows that for the salve, the CBT, that people do get relief for anxiety, depression, and pain, and, but there still remains that conflict of, violation of the federal law for it. Next item is the call to action, the ongoing call to action for the use of Narcan. This has been a tremendous success, as you know, and to date they've saved over 400 people from death, and that's just phenomenal. That can't be measured. And oftentimes the first responders have to fight with the individual to administer the Narcan because they don't want it. There's some discomfort with it, but it does save their life. And now they're administering, when needed, multiple doses of Narcan or naloxone to reverse the effects of an opiate. So continues to be very successful. Christine and Christina are doing a good job with media campaign and education. I think it's exciting to be driving down the street and see a big billboard or a bus sign that's promoting substance use disorder services, or go to the Imagine Theater and have it being advertised on the screen, radio advertising, cable advertising, Metro Parent Magazine, prescription bags at Kroger Pharmacy, and numerous speaking engagements. Several years ago, I was quite proud of Melkaya and her husband, who were on the side of buses. I forget what you were promoting. Was it CNA? Yeah. And I was just so proud to constantly see that. And so that's nice free publicity. It's publicity because it's free, promotions because it's free, and it doesn't have to be paid for it, so that's awesome. The transportation services for opiate-specific treatment services has been a boon for people who need transportation to get to opiate treatment services, and also being able to be referred to Uber and Lyft services. Mike, are you very much in that, those transportation services for people, or? Okay. Yeah, I thought you were, but I'll make sure. Okay, before I give you credit. The jail medication assistant treatment continues to do well. There was a time at the Oakland County Jail where doing that with prisoners was not popular, and we've since gone beyond that. In fact, what happens now is if a person's on a psychotropic or on a medication that is of that nature, oftentimes they'll be put in what's called K unit, and they're segregated away from the other prisoners, and it's kind of a protective measure, and it's also a way of de-stressing the situation for the person who is on a psychotropic medication. The problem with being incarcerated and being in treatment through a psychotropic medication, the person reverts back to a high rate of relapse. So it's well acknowledged that the treatment that a person gets while they're in the county jail with the medication is of great service, but then when they get out of the county jail, then there's a high relapse rate. And so that's something that is being continued to look at. We know that opiates have had a surge. However, interestingly enough, in Oakland County, the medical examiner reports that in 2018, there was a 28% decrease in overdose deaths from 2017, and the first decrease in overdose dose since 2008. So the success for that has been attributed to multiple Oakland County Health Network departments and community partners working together. Substance use disorder services continues to be mostly or oftentimes a prevention program, and we have 11 programs that assist people in that. We have the outpatient services, case management, peer recovery and coach services, which we were talking about earlier, and then we have recovery housing, medication-assisted treatment, such as in the county jail, where they use methadone, Suboxone, and Vivitrol, withdrawal management to help counteract relapse, residential treatment, and this is really good, women's specialty treatment for substance use services, such as being pregnant or having young children that they're caring for. And men, too, are eligible for treatment through that program, or primary care, givers. Finally, Victoria, thank you for sending along a letter that you received from the Oakland County Health Department about an alert going out to parents countywide for graduation. 2,000 kids die a year from auto accidents, and half of those accidents are alcohol-related. So they've been concerned about that, about the impact, but I'm not sure what the numbers are, but they're addressing that. And, the concern with teens or people who are under the age of 21 being in car crashes and underage drinking and driving. So, and that's my report. Thank you.
You have the director's report?
I think we're going to go ahead and pass those out. Okay, so I know many of you in the room, do we have one for out there? Okay, we have many of you in the room were probably at the CMH Association conference last week, but not everybody. So my director's report is focused on some really great accomplishments, and OCHN was represented very well last week at the conference. The first day of the conference, I was involved in a presentation. My co-presenters were Amy Heinzelman here from OCHN, and we joined Ambrosia Jackson from Macomb County CMH. And we did a presentation on trauma-informed care. So we overviewed how we as an agency have shifted to a trauma-informed culture and how important it is to our commitment to addressing the needs of our stakeholders. It has now become part of our state contract that our staff and providers and such be trauma-informed and implement the trauma policy. We're really proud and pleased, though, that we were doing it through a SAMHSA grant many years before it was ever a state requirement. You'll see the quote at the top of the director's report says, "You do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better." I think that's one thing that really I'm proud of here at this agency. We ask for feedback, we get insight, we look into things, and then we improve. As we were implementing the trauma-informed culture and environment here at OCHN, one of the things we did was surveyed the people we support as far as their experience in our building and in interacting with our staff and in our lobby. And we've taken the results of those surveys very seriously. And now that we know how people perceive their interactions, we know we've got some areas to improve. Those of you who have been coming to the building for quite some time have probably noticed some people say I'm building a jungle out there with the plants and stuff, but the evidence shows that this makes for a warmer environment. Same with the art, trying to introduce things that make our building warmer. It's a very large building, so it's harder, but we're going to continue to work on it. The number one finding, though, that I found the most powerful is in the interview with people about how they felt in our building, and the data that meant the most to me is how they're interacted with and how they feel when interacting with our staff. So I know I've been trying in every staff meeting, and we have another staff meeting tomorrow where I will reinforce it again. It's all of our jobs to make people feel warm and welcome, and regardless of whether you're sitting at the reception desk in the lobby or you just happen to be walking by, we should all be greeting people, asking people if they need assistance and things like that. So we are definitely implementing trauma-informed best practices, and the nice thing is that these practices are very much in line with all the other things we're promoting, including a anti-stigma environment and our efforts in that area, culture of gentleness, radical hospitality, showing our value and appreciation for those we serve and their allies, and of course, empowerment through self-determination. On the second day of the conference, there was a session on criminal justice, homelessness, and mental health, and it was the cross-system collaboration. So our staff, Suri, Sakura, from our justice team, presented with 2 other community partners on our sequential intercept model and the role of our cross-system collaboration to help with at-risk individuals. So the focus of this presentation was to help gain knowledge about the systems and supports that we use to promote treatment instead of incarceration, as well as how to help people transition successfully back to their community. So how do we welcome and promote a smooth transition for our returning citizens? So both of those presentations were well attended and well received. But the part that I loved the most is that during lunch on both days, we had individuals that were honored with awards through the CMH Association. So the first award on the first day was the Jim Newbacher Media Award, and that was presented to Oakland County's Community Corner public broadcast TV show. And this is a show hosted by Aaron Castle, David DeWitt-Taylor, and Ryan Gray. They're 3 gentlemen with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are served in our service network. Their first show aired in October 2007 after the 3 gentlemen took a video production class. Now, this class is hosted in Troy through Community Media Network, and the beauty is this class has nothing to do with people with disabilities. Anybody in the community can sign up. After you complete the class, and it's all about taping, directing, filming, editing, then you have the option of staying with the network and developing a TV show on public broadcast television. Most people who graduate do not go on to continue to have a TV show, but these gentlemen have gone on since October 2017. I was their 3rd guest back in 2007, so I am thrilled to know 12 years later they're still going strong. So they interview people about the impact of services for folks with disabilities, and their main message is focused on the ability of people and not the limitations, and it's all about increasing awareness and reducing stigma. I will say when they received their award, the best part, I think, of the entire conference, and I had a lot of people say this afterward, was their acceptance speech. The entire audience, and I don't know, there's 400 or 500 people there. The majority of the people had tears in their eyes because the gentlemen were so touched with getting the award, and they did very passionate speeches. But then, to make it even better, on the second day of the conference, the final lunch before the end of the conference, our BEST team, Begin Ending Stigma Today committee, was honored with the 2019 Anti-Stigma Partners in Excellence Award. So you guys are familiar with our BEST team and our anti-stigma messages. Instead of going into a long nomination, they showed the video, the Just Like You video that we have shown here, and that too was very impactful for the audience to see. So obviously our BEST work group is comprised not only of peers and others who work here at OCHN, but throughout our entire provider network, and they're focused on creating a stigma-free culture within our mental health system, and they promote respect for all people living with mental illness, intellectual developmental disabilities, and substance use. So it was a proud, proud day for all of us connected with Oakland County, a proud conference in general, and I want to offer my congratulations again to Vicki, Malkaya, and all the members of our BEST team. And it was a wonderful conference to be from Oakland County. We were represented very well. And that concludes my report.
Is there any other business to be brought before the board? Okay. Now is the opportunity, second opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody that would like to give public comment? Please sign your name and address on the sheet and come up to the microphone. Yeah, so we can hear you.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I am a patient. I receive services in Oakland County. I've lived here for 20 years, except for in Grand Rapids the last 5 years, where I was a patient in Kent County. I became a patient for mental health services when I was 26 years old. I have Crohn's disease, a severe autoimmune disease. I take biologic therapy for it, hardcore stuff. And I had a denial. I'm getting out of order here. Anyways, I got into mental health services after I had a ostomy and a bowel resection. Finally got on proper treatment. I desperately needed some help chemically and someone who would understand my situation, and I was blessed with a psychiatrist who was a cancer survivor. She took great care of me. I also received, I did group, I went to a therapist every week, that kind of thing. I came back here in Oakland County in April. I have been seeing CNS and Novi. I'm really dissatisfied with the care I've received there. I am complex medical case and I'm a very difficult patient. Basically, my biggest complaint is with the requirement of patients to attend case management. Like I said, I'm a complex medical case. I don't always have it in me to go and do those meetings with someone to feel like a number. My issue was with case management not being competent. They could not read, in my opinion, at a high school level. And they were in college. They were going for a master's in social work. My only request was just to not attend those services. I'm not saying no one should, but it was just, it was forced, it was required. So in 3 months of being here, I've received 1 doctor's appointment and 1 counseling appointment, but it's so frustrating. The intake was very good at Waterford, CNS, and then when I went to Novi, it was just a disaster. I mean, I don't want to name names, but it's just inconsistent. There were a lot of people that were nice, but one of my biggest things is this whole person-centered planning and this trauma-informed care. I just think it's just something nice to say, but when you have severe disease, physical, you don't want to go and waste your time with people who might not be qualified, even if they're a college graduate. There's a difference between getting the job and being able to do it and just having the degree. And so, like, I was a Parks and Rec major. Let me see what I have here. So yeah, I'm just trying to say less is more with this whole managed care approach. The trauma-informed. If somebody is sick physically and doesn't want to expose themselves to germs, I would love to have a conference over the phone instead of drive 23 miles to go see someone. And I can't even trust them. I do not trust a social worker who cannot read at a college level or a high school level. And it's always just, I reached out to OCHN and had a good experience and talked a lot with them, and they know about this issue, but I am single, I have no children, I do not have a drug history. I work when I am able to. I see that there's no reason for me to attend case management against my will if this is person-centered planning. And I looked at the funds, for the 6 months estimated for the case management alone was nearly $3,000. I just want to see the psychiatrist because, like I said, I'm medically complex. I do want to have that support by an MD in psychiatric medicine. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments with us, and you will receive a written response. Okay. Does the executive director have any comments? I do not. Okay. Do board members have any comments? Sid?
You heard anything on the foundation request that we talked about?
Fundraising?
Yes.
Yeah, I sent it out in an email to everybody, so we did get a legal statement from our corporate attorney, and I said we should probably put it on committee of whole agenda so we can all, have a dialogue about it, but it does appear that we are able to receive donations and fundraising.
Oh, yeah, I missed that.
That's okay. It's very recent. It was
Okay.
yesterday or today, so.
That explains it. Anyway, I've been, my own feeling is I've been denied the opportunity to perform a role that is much needed in this organization, and that is an oversight committee as it relates to finances. I am not advocating to have a committee that looks at Anya's line items and analyzes them. I don't think that's necessary. But there are some financial matters that we as a board should really at least have a conversation about. we went through a terrible period, and Anya since my meetings with Anya, I've gotten to learn that the way the money comes in, the way the money goes out, should not be a concern of the board's or mine, because there's valid reasons for what she's doing. And I've noticed that her presentations have improved dramatically just in the last 5 months, 6 months. And that's a compliment to you, Anya. And quite frankly, I think if we had an oversight committee last year, we would not be looking at the trends we're looking at today. They would have been improved. And for example, we don't even have a capital improvement fund. We're talking about repairing the parking lot. Where does the money come from? If we had a capital improvement fund, those funds might be available. Our reserves are dwindling. Matter of fact, if you look at the trend, we have trends that are going downward in the wrong direction. I take my role seriously as a board member. As a matter of fact, I asked the question tonight, are we investing any monies or reinvesting any monies? And Anya answered that very appropriately, and I was quite satisfied to know that we are not in the market of buying into a possibility of rent decreases. It's not the prudent way to manage money. And I suspect if you believe all the pundits and all the financial people today, interest rates are coming down. And if they do come down within the next few days, I just did some rough calculations, we stand to gain $75,000 a month to the good. And not buying into that market right now is going to be a benefit to us. I think there's also we got a lot of talented people on this board, and they could certainly offer input to a lot of potential ideas that we could have towards protecting our financial assets. I'm glad to hear about the foundation. If we're allowed to do that, I believe this organization has a better opportunity to raise funds than Easter Seals, and they do a fantastic job. So I'm once again suggesting, and I hope it gets supported, that we have an opportunity to set aside some time for either a committee of the whole meeting or a study session so that we can all have input as to what we are looking for at that role. If you noticed, we had a lot of reports. We have the Oversight Policy Board Committee. We used to have a financial committee meeting and report. That was kind of disbanded. There were certain people that didn't want it, and it was thrown aside. I don't want to go backwards. If we can't have a financial oversight committee, I don't think that I should accept the role of chairman of a business ops committee. We don't need that. So maybe if we all get together and talk about what options we have, it might make it better for our board and the vision going forward. So think about that, and I'd like to see that on an agenda, as an agenda item or devoted at a study session.
As you know, our staff don't dictate the way the board meets, so, yeah, I will put it as a
I've had that-
requested item on one of our meeting
I've had the
agendas.
discussion with Judy.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I am preparing the roles and obligations of the Financial Oversight Committee, which we as a board will have an opportunity to look at it, read it, dwell into it, throw it away, discard it, do whatever. So
Timing might be good for that conversation because Jonathan had also requested that committee of whole be another evening meeting instead, so we're going to be talking about the meeting structures anyways. My only hesitation as the CEO is that if you look, we have, I don't know, 12 or 14 employees, and that will be then a fourth meeting that we'll have in the evening. But, we'll do what the board is requesting of us. So that's why we'll have dialogue about it, though. We'll have dialogue about it. I'll put it down for a committee of whole topic.
I'm sorry, 1 second. And just before I leave it, I don't think it would be necessary to have spend a lot of time with staff to go over some of the issues like we once had. We don't have those issues now. We may have different challenges, and we can solve those challenges. At least we can all become more concerned and involved about which direction we're going and how some of these changes that are happening in Lansing may or may not affect us.
I would also support Mr. Rubin's comments, and I know previously when I served on the board in the 2010 arena, we had a business operations committee that met separately from the public policy committee. So there were two separate meetings. One was, I believe, 2 to 3:30, and the other one was 3:30 to 5, and then you could stay. They were back to back, so you could stay for each one of either or for both. But depending upon the committee assignment that you had, that was the one that you were assigned to. But I think that would be helpful, and it also would be helpful with maybe condensing the meetings down a little bit to a more digestible time frame. So if you're here for an hour and a half, then you could choose to leave for the other half if you don't need to be at the public policy committee. But I do like the idea that Mr. Rubin raises, and I felt that that's something that we were involved with back in 2010, with being able to delve into some of the information a little bit more and understand. I think right now would be, just in my opinion, a good time to relook at some of the committee structures. I've also sent an email off to Judith and also to Victoria, who's given me some information on some of the other committees and things and days that they meet, just to get back up to speed and understanding of a lot of the information. And then additionally, we do have 3 new board members on the board. So I think right now would be as good a time as any to really start talking about this in the structure and having an opportunity for us as, me getting back up to speed on things and the other 2 new board members as well, all of us catching up to where everybody else is at, having some time, more one-on-one, where we can ask some questions, even if it is just amongst the board or in a committee structure, so we can get more insight and information. A study session potentially, but I do like the idea of having an oversight, a finance committee, something to what we had previously before. And I know that back then when we had that, I felt very informed as far as the business operations and the things that were happening. So this might be as good a time as any for us as a board to start really looking at that. But that's my 2 cents in my opinion. Thank you.
Well, I would agree with the 2 of them very much. I think there's no reason to wait. If we can agree on the fact that an oversight committee is good or that we need a study session, it does seem like the committee as a whole is a lot. And for sure, you don't need to have all staff. If it's just regarding financing, then it doesn't make any sense to do that.
It's my understanding that that request has come before the board, before I was in my position, 4 times and was voted down, but we have a new board. So, it's not saying it couldn't be discussed again. So my only thought is, it's not my power to say yes. It's my power to take it to Judy. You know, we get it on an agenda, it's presented to everybody and voted on. So I'm certain that that can happen. And like I say, we're already going to have to vote on whether we're going to move committee of the whole. And there's obviously other things. I think Melchiah is temporarily the CAC rep. I don't know if it became permanent, but we have Lois's former role there. We have an open role on our appeals committee. So there's lots of opportunity for board members who want to be more involved in day-to-day operations. But nonetheless, I hear the request, and I will promote whatever I can to bring it up for a vote again, you know.
That's great. And I just want to thank Vicki and Anya also about, you know, putting together that peer information packet. We kind of were tough on you, but it's a great start. And there's a variety of reasons things happen, and I just wanted to thank you. That was very, very helpful. And congratulations on getting the best award. That's pretty incredible. So feel really proud to be a part of that. Thank you.
I just want to support what's being said about business ops. I think we lost a lot when we combined the two committees together. I mean, I think the idea was worth trying, but it really seems like business ops or business operations or the finances have taken a back seat. You know, Anya's certainly to be commended for what she's done. She's filled us in, but we used to have in-depth discussions about our own business operations, and I think we just have lost something when we stopped doing that. So I would be in favor of trying to do something to reinstitute something.
I want to make an announcement. I passed out a flyer. July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want to encourage board members that can to come out to the event that we have planned Tuesday, July 16th from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. We had our first event last year, and it was very, very successful, and we're very excited about what we have planned for this year. We're encouraging people who would like to dress a native dress. We have, besides the African dancers, we have Hispanic dancers and I believe Indian dancers this year. So we want to incorporate as much diversity as possible. This is something that's very important to me because I feel like some of the misunderstandings that take place between people really come because of not knowing. And the more I learn about people, the more I realize and recognize we have more in common than we don't. And every opportunity we can to come together and share and appreciate and respect the differences, I think will make us a stronger network. So I want to encourage each and every one that can to attend that event. You won't be sorry.
In order, let me just be next. The 4 times we voted on breaking up the committee of the whole into the former 2 committees, I was the one that made the motion. Okay. And the most votes we got was 4. So everybody, this has happened before, everybody says they want it, but when it comes up for a vote, we have 3 votes one time, 3 votes another time, 4 votes the other 2 times. And I was against it when Judy combined them, because I thought this would happen. But the reasoning behind it, I was on the Policy and Management Committee. I'm not really that good when you get down to below the 20,000-foot view of the numbers. So I was happy to sit on that committee and listen to their committee minutes, and that's as much as I wanted to know about it. So, but a lot of the board members said, well, they're going to both committee meetings because they want to know about finance and policy. Well, my opinion of that is go to both meetings then. And I'm glad to have it brought up and discussed again, but I'm really good at counting votes being married to a politician. I only count 6. If everybody showed up at a meeting, I still only count 6 votes, so that would still make it a tie. So maybe after we discuss it, business needs to be probed in a different way than policy, not sitting up here and having somebody give a report to you. You need to get down and dig with 6 people. You don't need a lot of staff. You might need Anya. Anya might have to come to a lot of meetings, but you just need somebody to answer questions that they're interested in. So
And Anya's never been opposed to it, so I mean,
Yeah,
whatever the
so I think
board
it's good that
wants.
we're, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Sarah.
Can I say
yeah,
something?
Malcolm.
I didn't want to get into this now, but I still feel that I need to say something. When we had the two separate committees, we had staff coming to both committees, giving the same reports twice. Sometimes we weren't getting the same information and having to come to two, because at the time I was chair and I was coming to both of those meetings. It was taxing on the staff, very taxing on the staff, because they had to present to us repeatedly. I'm not saying that it's not a good idea, but I just want to say, before we make any decision about this, please consider the people that would have to work with us. Because it's what, 9:15 now? I don't know what time these lovely people came, but they tough it out with us. We ask a lot of them. We ask a lot of them, and we're saying we don't need a lot of staff. But the staff are the ones that have the answers to the questions that we need to ask. So I appreciate everybody wanting to be brought up to speed and be informed. Because we only meet technically 24 times out of a year. That's a big learning curve. But you're not going to get it all, and overtaxing the staff is not going to make it better for us either. So I felt I just needed to say that, just a word of caution, because we need to consider the people that have to do the work. We ask a lot of them.
Congratulations to the award winners. I was able to attend the conference, and I really enjoyed Melchiah's beautiful singing and speech. It was wonderful, so great job. One of the sessions that I was able to attend that several others were on the extended wait times in the emergency rooms. And I'm just wondering if there's any data, if it hasn't been presented recently, if we can get some data on our emergency time waits, or kind of how we're dealing with that. And I know the session there was particularly for those with developmental disabilities, but I'm wondering mental health as well, kind of where we're at in the county.
Presentation similar to that, probably the month before you started, but nonetheless, I can get the materials and distribute it to everyone via email, and if we want a repeat presentation, we could, but that way you'll at least have the materials on hospitalization, wait time, turnaround, all that. Okay.
Thank you. So I'll respond to some of the conversation I've heard around the board this evening. I know there's a good half dozen folks that are OCHN employees that are here observing during the meeting. Not that they're going to respond to any question or topic that's raised tonight. So I always wondered, I remember way back when Jeff was the executive director, and he sort of had this expectation that leadership employees should be at these meetings just to make the room full. I think there was probably more to it than that, but I never really understood what the benefit is to them or to the benefit to the folks that are here or our board. So I still wonder, but I appreciate that you guys are here, and I recognize it makes for a long day for you guys. So an acknowledgement for your time and efforts.
I'll just say I never gave any directive to any of them, and they all come because they respect you as helping us set leadership and policy, and I think it's an engagement of wanting to know the direction that our board wants to see them as leaders. So I've never mandated that any of them be here.
I knew that. Okay. Well, that Jeff had a different feeling on that.
Maybe it's carryover, and I don't know, but I respect them for being here.
So I have two things and one, Anya, this is going to sound for those that are old enough to remember what a broken record is. So I've been watching the Medicaid rolls, and I know that our revenues are derivatives of, the Medicaid Medicaid enrollees in the county. And I've been watching the state is getting healthier economically, and that over the last 4 months, our Medicaid enrollments in Michigan for Oakland County are dropping again from almost 130,000 down to, in May, it was 125. So that eventually is going to have an impact potentially on our revenues. And maybe we'll get lucky to get through the end of this fiscal year, but we may have to tighten up our revenue expectations for next year. So I'll let you know. You probably watch it every day, too. And the others, I saw your note earlier, Annette, about COFR. So for those that don't know, COFR is the County of Financial Responsibility, which means that, to put it nicely, if someone lives in another county, but they come in, they get services from a provider in this county, we may pay that provider, although we shouldn't, but then we have some effort to get the money back from the county that they are a resident in. If I got the COFR concept right. In a normal payer environment, if the doctor treats you and they don't participate in Blue Cross, they don't get any reimbursement by Blue Cross. So, and if you happen to be a Blue Cross member, but then, if they have to seek reimbursement elsewhere, which is usually how it is. I'm not suggesting that we stop paying our providers for when a Wayne County resident comes to one of our providers for service, but I know that there must be a way to encourage them to seek providers in their own county if Detroit Wayne doesn't want to play with us to reach that equilibrium of what they owe us for services we provide.
There's a state contract that says you serve people who show up at your door and worry about reimbursement later. So we're contractually mandated to serve and then seek the funding reimbursement later. So we're kind of, one, we always want to do the right thing, but we are getting the short end on that reimbursement part.
Know it.
Yep.
And I remember when hospitals got in trouble for taxi cab rides from their EDs to emergency rooms to other hospital emergency rooms because they didn't want to deal with uninsured people. They got into big trouble in the state and elsewhere. So I know we don't want to do that. And yes, we do have to serve people that show up, but the idea that we can encourage them to, while we'll treat them this time, that they should go elsewhere, that they should look to see the services that are in Wayne County instead, that's not breaking the spirit of the law or the rule of the law, because we'd still be treating them and providing services, but giving them other alternatives that may be easier for them to get to.
We'll look at the policy, and I don't know if we can or not, but we'll take a look at the policy, and we're already exploring it in the Tri-County agreement. Yeah.
Okay, there being no more business, the meeting is adjourned.